Hey you, it's late, and you could be doing anything, scrolling, snacking, maybe trying to fall asleep. But instead, you're here, with me, in the dark. And tonight, we're not visiting some air-conditioned museum with clean glass cases and quiet music playing in the background. We're going somewhere else. Somewhere dustier, stranger, warmer. You've probably seen ancient Egypt 100 times, golden tombs, mummies wrapped like secret pyramids that pierce the desert sky. But forget the polished postcards. That's not where we're going. Not tonight. We're stepping into the life of a pharaoh. Not the part they show in documentaries, the glorious thrones and conquests, but the part they whisper about. The sleepless nights, the paranoia, the rituals, the blood, and the fear. That even if you rule an empire, you might never rule your own fate. This isn't a story for textbooks. It's a slow drift into the past, into stone halls where voices echo forever, into candlelit chambers with locked doors, into beliefs that built and broke kings. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? What time is it for you right now? Drop a comment. It's always comforting to see how far this sleepy little community stretches. If you enjoy sinking into quiet corners of history with me, feel free to like or subscribe. Only if you want to, of course. No pressure. You're safe here. Now, dim the lights. Let the fan hum like desert wind. And take a breath. You're not standing on sand. You're standing on silence. Let's begin. You wake up in the middle of the night, not because of a nightmare, but because the dream felt real. Too real. You were falling. And just before you hit the ground, you heard something. A whisper. Your name. Now your eyes are open, but the shadows around you still move. You're not in a bed. You're on a golden platform, linen sheets soaked in perfume, walls covered in protective prayers, incense still curling in the air. But the scent is not enough to cover the fear. You're Pharaoh, ruler of the land, son of the gods. And yet, you don't know who to trust anymore. Was that a footstep just outside the chamber? Or only your heart playing tricks again? You lie still, not blinking, not breathing too loudly. Because here in this palace built for worship and power, every corner hides a prayer or a dagger. Every servant may be loyal until they're not. Every meal could be a gift or a trap. You glance at the goblet near your bed. The wine's been blessed 3 times a day. But still, you don't drink. Because in this life, being divine isn't a comfort. It's a cage. You rule Egypt, but you do not sleep free. You do not eat without caution. You do not trust the silence. You're not awake because of fear. You're awake because you're being watched. You've probably imagined Egypt as endless dunes and scorching skies, pyramids rising out of golden sand and pharaohs gleaming in gold. But that's not where we're starting. Not tonight. You're standing by the Nile. It's not dry. It's not burning. It's early morning. The sun is barely climbing up the horizon. There's mist rising from the water, catching the light like a veil. And the air, it smells like damp reeds, crushed papyrus, and morning bread. You hear a soft clink, the sound of clay pots being lowered into the river. Somewhere nearby, a cow lets out a low sigh. A boy whistles as he gathers lotus leaves. A woman calls her son back inside. Life begins here, not in the desert, but by the water. Egypt isn't just a land of sand. It's a civilization carved along the Nile's breath. Every village, every field, every temple, it faces the river. Because the river is life, and everything else is survival. You take a few steps toward a cluster of homes made of mud brick. Not fancy, but warm. Children run past your feet, laughing barefoot. A man sharpens a sickle with a whetstone. Another balances a basket on his head filled with fish, wrapped in wet leaves. The social order here is invisible, but absolute. Farmers don't speak to scribes unless spoken to. Scribes bow to temple priests. Priests chant to the gods. And above them, all unseen, but always felt, is Pharaoh. But Pharaoh doesn't own the land. No one does. It all belongs to the gods. Every inch of earth is divine property. And Pharaoh, he's just the earthly manager. The divine middleman. Both man and God, but also neither. The sun rises higher now, brushing the tops of the reed roofs. You notice people pausing briefly to face east toward the light. A silent habit, a reminder. Every day is a gift from Ra, and every moment is an offering or a test. Somewhere behind you, the temple drums begin to beat, low, steady. The gods are waking, and high above all this, in a palace wrapped in incense and silence, a single man is stirring. He's not just waking up. He's preparing to become divine again. The sun is higher now, but you are not outside. You're inside a palace. Its walls are thick, its windows are narrow, and the light that slips through is not warm. It's filtered distant like a guest who doesn't want to stay. You are Pharaoh, but your day is not yours. Not even your breath belongs to you. The servants are already here. They've been awake since long before the sun. None of them speak unless asked. None of them look at you. They bow, hands open. One holds scented oil, another water from the Nile, a third linen as white as moonlight. You do not dress yourself. You are dressed. Your body is a ritual site. First your feet are washed, then your head is anointed. Sacred ointment behind the ears, a drop on the chest, a line across your forehead, symbol of rebirth. Then come the robes, not just clothing. Each layer represents a god. The outer cloak is for Osiris, the belt for Horus, the collar for Ra. Each piece is whispered into place. And while they do this, a priest reads from a scroll. It's the morning invocation, to wake the gods, to awaken you, the living God. You sit still, not because you want to, but because every movement must be precise. They place the heavy crown on your head. Your neck adjusts to the weight. You've worn this since you were a child. It never gets lighter. You raise your arms only when they tell you. You take your first sip of date wine only when the ritual permits it. You've done this every morning, for years. There's no deviation. To break the cycle is to invite chaos. And yet inside, deep inside, you ache for something unscripted, a real laugh, a silent walk alone, a name that's not one of your 5 divine titles. But you are not allowed those things. You are Pharaoh. You are the face of balance, the guardian of the sacred harmony. Even your smile must be symmetrical. Even your silence must be sacred. And so you breathe in the incense. You nod to the priest, and you rise. You don't walk out as a man. You float forward as a symbol. The gods are watching. The people are watching. And you are not really here. You sit on the throne, but the power doesn't sit with you. Not entirely. You see in Egypt, even a pharaoh answers to forces far older than any king, to whispers in the wind, to stars shifting in the sky, to the twitch of a cat's tail, to the sound of a frog croaking twice before dawn. This is not a country ruled by reason. It is ruled by signs, by symbols, by what cannot be explained but must be obeyed. You want to begin a new temple project? You'll have to wait. Because the priest has read the entrails of a goose and the curve of its liver says, not today. You want to appoint a new general. He looks capable, loyal, but someone dreamt of a falling feather last night. So, no. He cannot serve. Not yet. The stars are watching. The dead are listening. And your actions are not your own. You've grown up with this. Since childhood, you've been taught the language of the gods. A cloud shaped like a serpent, war is coming. A breeze from the east at sunrise, time to make an offering. A dog barking 3 times, a betrayal is near. Sometimes, you wonder if it's all coincidence. But then, one morning, the lotus in your courtyard blooms a day early, and that night, your cousin dies in his sleep. The line between pattern and prophecy becomes thinner every day. And so you follow the rituals. You consult the calendar. You make decisions, not based on logic, but on the tilt of the moon. Your advisors nod. They pretend this is strength. But you know better. You are not governing a kingdom. You are interpreting a divine riddle. And the punishment for a wrong answer is never just political. It's cosmic. You've seen kings fall not from rebellion, not from famine, but from birds flying west instead of east. You've seen crops fail because someone forgot to bless the irrigation ditch. You've seen a man executed because he sneezed during the king's speech. And still, despite everything, you try to rule. You try to act with reason. But you cannot ignore the priest when he looks you in the eye and says, "My Pharaoh, a scarab appeared on your bedpost this morning. It crawled toward the west." You nod. You change your entire plan for the week. Because here, in this sacred land, fear wears the face of reverence, and doubt is wrapped in gold. You don't believe in every sign. Not anymore. But you obey them anyway. Because in Egypt, faith isn't optional. It's survival. you know you're going to die. Not today, but not far off either, and you've known this for years. Because in Egypt, death doesn't come as a surprise. It comes as a guest you've been preparing for all your life. You've already chosen your tomb. The architects began carving it before your voice even deepened. You've chosen the spells, the oils, the position of your heart in the coffin. Because here death is not a closing, it's a crossing. And mummification, that isn't the final step. That's just the beginning of the journey. You lie still on a cool stone slab. The room is lit by oil lamps. The flames flicker against the polished faces of gold-tipped jars. It starts with smell. A pungent wave of resin incense and bitumen. Myrrh and frankincense thick in your throat, the scent of eternity. Then come the blades. Not made of bronze, stone. Ritual requires obsidian volcanic glass, untouched by iron. Sharp, silent. Your body is opened. One cut, not too long, not too deep. The embalmers do not speak. Their hands are steady. They remove your liver, your stomach, your lungs, one by one. Each organ is dried, wrapped, placed in its own sacred jar, each protected by a different god. Imseti for the liver, Hapi for the lungs, Duamutaf for the stomach, Kebasenuef for the intestines. Each jar is you, a part of your soul broken and scattered waiting to be reassembled in the afterlife. And your heart it stays, it must stay, because in the world beyond it will be weighed. Too heavy and you're devoured by the crocodile demon. Too light and the gods will laugh. Then, the final insult, your brain is not honored. It's pulled out through the nose, discarded. Because here the mind is not sacred, only the soul. Now you are packed with natron ancient salt white as bone. 30-40 days of drying. Priests chant, scribes record. And you once, Pharaoh ruler of millions, are reduced to ash linen and ritual. But this is not the end. No, this is the opening of the mouth. The ceremony to wake your spirit, to give you speech again. A sacred blade touches your lips, an offering of milk, a whisper of honey, a breath from the priest's mouth so your own may speak again in the hall of judgment. You will rise, not in body, but in memory, in stone, in spell, in name. You are no longer a man. You are becoming a myth. And myths do not sleep. You sit on the throne, but already someone is imagining it empty. Maybe more than one, because here power isn't passed like a gift. It's taken quietly, slowly, sometimes with a smile. Your greatest threat isn't a foreign army. It's the people who kiss your ring, your half-brother, your senior priest, even your favorite wife. Who will take your place, your son? Which one? The one born from the queen, or the one from the concubine, the priest's favor? Or the boy rumored to be sent by the gods after that strange night of incense and prayer? No one says it aloud, but everyone plays the game. One morning your second cousin dies suddenly. No illness, no warning. They say he fell from a stair. The guards don't recall hearing anything. Last week, your eldest son drank the same wine as you, but you woke up, he didn't. The priest said it was fate, but the cook hasn't been seen since. Your enemies don't need to rise against you. They just have to wait, and watch, and make sure you don't rise again. Your scribe has been changing how your name is written just slightly. A curve less pronounced, a sign reversed. If your name is recorded incorrectly enough times, it weakens you. Because a pharaoh must be remembered exactly or not at all. The real danger doesn't come with knives. It comes with ink and silence. The concubines smile sweetly at you in the hallway, but they whisper to each other in languages you don't know. You overheard one praying to a god you've outlawed, a forgotten name, a dangerous one. Your high priest tells you he dreams of you flying. He smiles as he says it. But in dream rituals, flying can mean something else: departure, ascension, or death. Your meals are blessed, your chamber guarded, your sandals inspected. Still you don't feel safe, because everyone around you is rehearsing your funeral, practicing their tears, perfecting their speeches, and some have already chosen what to wear to your burial. You are still breathing, but the race to replace you has begun. You rule a kingdom, but you do not rule your end. Night falls, the palace dims, but you do not sleep, not really. You lie beneath layers of linen and embroidered silk. The air smells like jasmine and melted beeswax. Your breathing is slow, controlled, but your eyes stay open long after the lamps are extinguished. The chamber is silent, too silent. Even the cicadas outside seem to pause. There are guards posted at the door, 2, maybe 3, but you don't trust them. You don't trust anyone, not after what happened to your uncle. He went to sleep one night and never woke up. No blood, no struggle. Just a single dried beetle found near his mouth. You roll onto your side slowly, careful not to disturb the bundle beneath your pillow. It's not for comfort, it's protection. Tucked inside, a small amulet in the shape of an eye, the Eye of Horus. A scarab, inscribed with a single name not yours. A strip of papyrus with 3 words written backward. They say if a spell is written in reverse, the demons can't read it. Only the gods can, and you, maybe. You close your eyes for a moment, but you don't drift off. Instead, you listen. There it is again. A rustle, a shift in the air. A sound too soft to be footsteps, but too deliberate to be nothing. You tell yourself it's a servant, checking the incense, adjusting the curtain. But deep down, you know better. Because here in Egypt, dreams are not just dreams. They're warnings. They're weapons. You've heard the stories, pharaohs who were killed not by blade but by symbols slipped into their sleep. A wrong word whispered into a dream, and their spirit never returned. You've ordered guards to be flogged for less, for sneezing at the wrong time, for whispering in hallways, for wearing the wrong charm near your bed. You don't take chances, not anymore. The amulet warms slightly beneath your fingers, maybe from your touch, or maybe something else. You stare at the ceiling. The stone glows faintly in the moonlight. You try to relax. You tell yourself it's just the wind, just the curtain. But still, you hear it. A soft sound, not quite breathing, not quite words. And you wonder, is it a servant? A spirit? A memory? Or is it someone reaching beneath your pillow, searching for the same secrets you've hidden all your life? You're not truly asleep when the sun rises, not anymore. You hear them before you see them. The sandals of servants, moving across polished stone. The rustle of linen robes. The soft chime of temple bells in the distance. It's morning again. But mornings don't begin with light. They begin with ritual. Your eyelids flutter, but you keep your face still. Because pharaohs are not supposed to yawn. They awaken in silence, like gods returning to flesh. The high priest enters first. He carries a reed scroll in a golden jar. He bows, but not to you, to the air around you, to the idea of you. Then come the attendants. 5 of them today. Maybe 6. You never learn their names. You're not meant to. They approach without eye contact. One places a bowl of lotus-scented water at your feet. Another unwraps fresh linen, not folded, but laid out like an offering. A third murmurs the opening verses of the Sun hymn. They don't speak to you. They speak for you, through you. You rise slowly because the crown is heavy. Your arms are lifted. Oils rubbed on your joints. Your wrists smell like frankincense. Your back aches from sleeping too still. But you don't complain. Gods don't groan. And you are a god. Even if your knees crack, the linen touches your skin like river mist. Cool, thin, soft, then layered until you feel caged in white. Your mouth is rinsed with honeyed water. Your breath is measured. Your silence is noted. It's just morning. But you feel like a corpse being dressed for judgment. One movement, wrong, one word out of place, and the spell of the day will break. And behind every ritual, every perfumed hand and sacred chant, lurks one quiet question: who still wants you alive? You walk the corridors, like a flame being carried on still air, not rushed, not alone, always observed. 2 guards ahead, 2 behind, 1 priest beside you reciting lines from the book of the day. Every step is rehearsed, every turn memorized. But not every gaze is loyal. You feel them, the eyes that don't quite look away fast enough, the ones that linger too long on your rings, on your throat, on your sandals. You've walked these halls since you were a child. You know the echo each step should make. Today, one sounds wrong, too soft, like someone stepped on cloth. You say nothing. The statues watch you too. Falcon-headed Horus, jackal-faced Anubis. Their eyes are stone, but you've seen them shift before. Or maybe that was just the candlelight, or maybe not. You pause before a small idol near a column. It's been freshly cleaned, still wet. The scent of salt water and cedar hangs in the air. A purification offering, or a warning your fingertips brush the base of the statue. Something's been etched there recently, a mark too new to belong. You keep walking, because asking questions can sound like fear. And pharaohs don't fear, at least not out loud. The scribes follow at a distance. One of them carries a tablet, not for messages, but for names. Names to reward, names to erase. The corridor ends at a door of dark wood, painted with gold, carved with spells. You pause. Someone is already kneeling behind it. They knew you were coming. Your breakfast table is set, but not by hands you trust. The bread is round, fresh, still warm with a crosshatch scored into the top. The honey is thick, slow to drip. Figs sliced open, their red centers exposed like wounds. The wine dark, still waits in a narrow glass bowl. But you don't eat, not yet. The priest arrives first. He stands behind the chair and raises both arms. In one hand, a blade of flint. In the other, incense and natron salt. The blessing begins. He slices the air above the food. 3 cuts, north to south, east to west, then a circle counterclockwise. A whisper follows words older than memory, meant to sever evil, to silence poison. Still, you hesitate, because the food has been touched, handled, seen. You think of your cousin who died during supper. The same week his name was added to the succession list. You think of the last servant who poured your wine. He's not in the palace anymore. No one will say why. You break the bread. Only a small piece. You chew slowly. Not because it's hot, but because you're listening. For any change in your heartbeat, any dryness in your throat, any taste too sharp. Because here breakfast is a ritual, but also a test of loyalty, of memory, of nerves, and the one you really fear isn't the cook. It's the one who gave the cook permission. You are Pharaoh, but no one calls you by your true name, not in public, not even in private, because your true name is power, and power in Egypt is something to be guarded, not given. You have 5 names, everyone knows this, 5 sacred titles, each with a role, each meant to anchor you in time, in divinity, in myth. The Horus name links you to the falcon god. The 2 ladies' name invokes the protection of Upper and Lower Egypt. The golden Horus name a symbol of eternal triumph. The throne name the one carved into temples. And finally, the birth name, the one you entered this world with. That last one, the one your mother whispered in the dark, the one your nursemaid sang before you could walk, is hidden, kept secret. Because if an enemy knows it, they can use it. They can etch it backwards into a clay figure, wrap it in thorns, bury it with dung, drown it in a jar. And your soul, your real soul, will feel the sickness creeping in. It's not a children's tale. It's law, spoken softly by priests, carved into the walls of tombs. Even your tomb, already half complete, bears your throne name, not your birth name. Because if the wrong lips speak the truth, you could die twice. Once in flesh, once in memory, and the second death is permanent. That's why you commission so many inscriptions, why your name is chiseled into doorways, columns, obelisks. Because to be remembered is to survive. As long as anyone speaks your name aloud, you are not truly gone. But it must be the right name, spelled perfectly, pronounced with care. Any mistake, even a careless scribe, could begin to unravel your afterlife. You once punished a priest for shortening your epithet, just one missing word. But that word could have cost you eternity. And so each day when your titles are read, you listen, not with pride, but with fear. Because in Egypt, identity is a spell, and yours must be cast over and over without error. You are Pharaoh, but you are also a secret, and somewhere deep beneath the linen and gold, beneath the titles, the myths, the monuments, a child's name still waits in silence. And no one, not even you, dares to say it. They see you as divine, radiant, immaculate, but they never see you real. Because the truth is, your head is shaved, your scalp is bare, your hair is not your hair. No one speaks of it, no one dares. Every morning after your bath, after the oil is rubbed into your skin, a servant brings the box, long, lacquered, gold inlaid with lapis lazuli. Inside the wig, Made from threads of palm fiber, lamb wool, sometimes with human hair. Not your own, of course. You've never been allowed to grow it. Hair is impure, they say. A trap for evil spirits. A place for bad omens to hide. But a pharaoh must look perfect, powerful, immortal. So the wig is brushed smooth, scented with sweet oil and ground myrrh, and placed gently on your head. A weight you've carried since childhood. You remember the first time, how heavy it felt, how it slipped slightly with sweat, how you wished just once to feel the wind on your bare scalp. But wind is not allowed in here, and neither is freedom. The wig becomes your face, your mask. It holds the cobra emblem, the uraeus, the symbol of divine authority. People bow to it, to the icon on your brow, not to the skin underneath. You've worn it so long some days you forget where the false ends and the real begins. At night, when no one watches, you remove it, slowly, carefully. The oils have soaked into the linen cap beneath. It smells of frankincense, and faintly of sweat. You look into the bronze mirror. Your face is the same, but somehow less. You run a hand across your scalp, smooth, cool. Not sacred, just skin. No one is allowed to see you like this, not even your wives. Not even your own reflection for too long. Because if you stare too long, you might begin to remember that you're not a god. You're just a man, and a pharaoh can't afford to be just a man. The room is dark. The incense has burned out. The guards outside have changed shifts, again. But you're still awake. Your eyes are shut. Partly, but not completely. Because pharaohs don't sleep like other men. Pharaohs are not allowed to. One eye always lingers just slightly open. A slit of vision, a sliver of doubt. It began years ago after the first attempt. A cup of pomegranate juice offered by a hand too eager. A faint smell of bitter almonds. A night of vomiting. A week of trembling. Since then, sleep became delicate, dangerous. You trained your body to rest with awareness, to lie still, but remain alert. You can count heartbeats in the dark. You can sense movement from the shift in air. Sometimes you sleep sitting up, wrapped in robes, eyes half-lidded, the cobra crown beside you. No one notices, because no one wants to admit the God King is tired. But you are, so tired. The priests say even Ra must close his eyes during his journey through the underworld. But you're not Ra. You're a man pretending to be Ra, and you can't afford to blink too long. You keep charms beside the bed, under the mattress, in the folds of your robe, a silver amulet in the shape of an open eye, a painted spell on the ceiling above you, glowing faintly in resin ink. You've memorized the prayer for protection against night demons. You whisper it sometimes, just once, just in case. You trust no one, not the handmaid who fluffs your pillow, not the guard who claims to have served your father, not even the cat that curls beside your foot, too silent, too still, too watching. You told yourself it was paranoia. But then again last week, a royal cousin died in her sleep. They said it was fever, but you heard the servants whisper. You saw the priest remove something from beneath her bed, a reed doll, bound with black thread, stuffed with crushed beetle shells and a fingernail. You haven't slept deeply since, because here death can arrive like a lullaby, soft, sweet, disguised as peace. And if you close your eyes, if you truly close them, you might not be the one who opens them again. Your brother has died. You sit on the throne, your face is still. The hall is filled with incense, the kind that stings your eyes. But your eyes do not water. They must not. Because pharaohs do not cry, gods do not grieve. When a loved one dies, the ritual begins. You wear white, you carry a staff, you recite the ancient lines, and you do not weep. The crying that's done by others? There are women hired for this, professionals. They beat their chests, tear their clothes, smear ashes across their faces. They wail like jackals. They scream your pain for you. You sit in silence watching. You're not numb, you're not heartless, you're just not allowed. Because tears are mortal, and you, at least in public, are not. The high priest finishes the recitation. A scribe records the date. A singer hums a lamentation so old its meaning is half lost. You feel the grief rising in your chest. You clench your hands until your nails press into your palm. You bite the inside of your cheek, and when the ache becomes too much, you simply walk away. Down a corridor, past statues, past guards who pretend not to look. You stop before a small side chamber. It used to be your brother's favorite place, a garden court half enclosed, shaded by papyrus reeds. You step inside, alone, you kneel, and for a moment you let yourself breathe, really breathe. Not like a king, not like a god, but like a boy who lost the only person who ever called him by his secret name. You don't cry? Not yet. But you hear something, a sound you don't expect, a soft sob, far off, somewhere in the stone, or maybe just in your memory. You look behind you, no one, just a vase of dried flowers left too long in the heat. Still, you swear you can hear it, a weeping echo trapped between the walls. Maybe hers, maybe yours, maybe the gods mourning what they took from you. You stand again, straighten your robes, wipe your hands, though they're not dirty, and you return to the throne, face calm, eyes dry, because grief in this palace is not a feeling. It's a performance, and your tears are someone else's job. The boy looks like you? That's what they all say. He has your eyes, your mouth, your walk. But so did the last one, and he wasn't yours. You sit beside the child in the garden court. He's playing with a carved lion, a gift from one of your foreign wives. His laughter is soft, innocent, too innocent. You watch him closely. His hands, the way he holds the toy, too steady, too practiced. He's only 6. But already the priests are whispering that he could be chosen, that the gods favor him. You don't remember the gods ever asking your opinion. The queen swears he's yours. So do her attendants. And the high priest, of course, agrees. But there are rumors, always rumors, that the boy was born 9 months after a mysterious ritual, that a barren woman suddenly conceived after drinking from the sacred lake, that a jackal was seen near the palace the night he cried for the first time. Too many signs, too many symbols, too convenient. And yet, you find yourself wanting it to be true, wanting to believe he's yours, that there's someone to carry your name, even if you can't speak that name aloud. But belief doesn't stop the whispers, especially in the women's quarters. You once overheard a handmaid say the boy smells like a scribe, that he reads too easily, speaks too clearly. Your father's sons weren't like that. Your father's sons died young, or went mad, or both. You rise from the bench. The boy looks up, he smiles, says, "Will you walk with me?" Father, you nod, but inside something tightens, because if he's not yours, he could still be someone's. A priest's son, a soldier's mistake, or worse, a gift from someone who wants to own your bloodline. And if he is yours, then one day he'll become Pharaoh. And one day he may wonder the same thing about his own child. That's how the cycle works. No certainty, no peace, just lineage ritual, and the endless question, who truly sired the next god? And what happens if the gods never answer? You sit before the mirror, but you do not recognize yourself, not immediately, because in Egypt, a mirror is not a tool. It is a gate, a polished disc of bronze burnished until it reflects not light, but memory, not clarity, but distortion. It does not show you what is. It shows what might be. Your attendants hold it at an angle. Never too close, never too direct. The surface bends your features. Your eyes seem larger. Your mouth too still. Your face unfamiliar. And yet it is yours. They call it the Eye of Hathor. Goddess of beauty, yes, but also of vengeance. Because the mirror, they say, remembers everything, even what you forget. You used to like mirrors. As a boy, you would smile into one practicing your royal gaze. Now you stare at your reflection only when required, because you know the risks. To see yourself clearly is dangerous. You adjust the wig. A priest sprinkles perfume behind your ears. Another chants a blessing, a soft murmur, like leaves brushing stone. But the mirror sees past all of that. It sees the cracks beneath the gold, the fear beneath the ceremony. You glance again. For a moment, just a flicker, you think you see someone else in the bronze. Not behind you, not beside you. Inside. A younger version of yourself, perhaps. Or something older, something waiting. You blink. It's gone. The servant lowers the mirror. You do not speak of it. You never do. Because the mirror is not a conversation. It's a test, a question. Who are you? Really Pharaoh God? Imposter? The ancients say, never gaze into a mirror by moonlight, for then it shows what hides in the soul. You broke that rule once, and since then, you've covered every mirror in your chamber after sundown, wrapped in linen, bound with red cord, because some reflections never leave, and some faces, even your own, are better left unseen. They say the gods taught men how to write, but they didn't teach everyone, only the chosen, because writing in Egypt is not communication, it's conjuration. You walk past the temple walls. Hieroglyphs ripple across the stone like spells mid-breath. Birds, eyes thrones, suns each shape sacred, each stroke alive. Not ink, not paint, not decoration. These are spells. You remember the first time you saw your name carved into stone. It wasn't pride you felt, it was fear. Because to write a name is to summon a soul. To misspell it is to wound it. To erase it is to kill it. That's why pharaohs have scribes trained for years just to learn how to write one name correctly. Yours. And still, you don't trust them. You inspect every stele, every tomb painting. You've stopped entire temple constructions because a single glyph was facing the wrong direction. Your chief priest once begged forgiveness for carving your name in black ink during a lunar eclipse. He was exiled the next day because black ink absorbs light, and during an eclipse, even words can turn traitor. Some signs can only be written in red, to warn, to ward off evil. Red is danger, red is power, red is the edge between silence and spell. You've had words hidden under statues, on the soles of sandals beneath the lids of jars, each one placed to bind, to protect, to preserve. But not all words are meant to be read. Some spells are written backwards, so demons can't understand them. So even the dead must tilt their heads to follow the meaning. You once caught a servant reading from a private scroll. He claimed it was a prayer, but the ink was blue, and no one writes prayers in blue. You burned it. You burned him too, not out of cruelty, but necessity, because a pharaoh's life is made of words, too many, and you vanish, too few, and you are forgotten. So you choose carefully. What is inscribed, what is spoken, what is buried? Because in Egypt, language is not freedom. It's a cage, gilded sacred, locked from the inside. And if one glyph falls into the wrong hands, your afterlife could be rewritten before it even begins. The breath stops, the chest falls silent, the servants freeze. But no one says he's dead, because pharaohs don't die. They begin to transform. The body lies still, not yet cold, the skin still flush with the last whispers of life. But already the world has changed around it. The chief priest steps forward. He bows, but not out of mourning, out of preparation, because death here is not an end. It's a procession. A chamber is sealed. The usual attendants vanish quietly, replaced by others. Specialists, they arrive in silence. They wear no jewelry, they carry no scrolls, only tools, the sacred blade, the measuring rope, the black stone jar filled with salt and oil. The air changes, it smells of cedar incense and something else, an edge, a weight, the smell of time beginning to collapse. The lips are sewn shut, not with thread, but with wax. The eyes gently pressed closed with linen and resin. But the ears left open, because the soul might still be listening. Every movement is choreographed. No gestures wasted, no words spoken, unless part of the rite. They do not cry. They do not speak your name. Not until the correct moment. Because if they speak too soon, they might call you back halfway between realms. Neither God nor ghost. Just stuck. So they wait. The book of going forth by day is opened. The first line is traced. A blessing, yes, but also a warning. You who walk the corridor of silence, beware the second death, because death in Egypt is layered. You die when your heart stops, again when your name is last spoken, and once more, if your soul forgets which path to take. The room is warm now, candles flicker, shadows stretch long, but the body, the God King, is still, silent, wrapped in potential, held between two worlds. And outside the chamber, no one breathes too loudly. No one prays out of rhythm. Because the Pharaoh is not gone. Not yet. He is listening. He is watching. He is deciding which way to go. They begin with a blade. Not metal, not at first. The first cut is done with stone. Obsidian, razor sharp, silent. Because metal comes from earth, but obsidian comes from fire. And fire cleanses the soul. The body lies on a tilted slab. Head north, feet south, facing the stars. The first incision is made along the left side, just below the ribs. A line as delicate as a whisper. The priest does not flinch. But the assistant, the one holding the jar, makes the sign of protection over his chest, because the act of cutting open a pharaoh is dangerous, not just physically, spiritually. Inside warmth lingers, even now, a final trace of life. The liver comes first, soft, heavy, cradled like something alive. It's rinsed with palm wine, anointed with cedar oil, then placed into a special jar, the canopic jar of Imsadi, the human-headed protector. Next the lungs, gray feather light, guarded by Hapi with the face of a baboon. Then the stomach. Coiled, still sour, given to Duamutev, jackal-headed and fierce. Finally, the intestines long twisting, still steaming slightly. They go to Kabesanuef, the falcon-headed guardian. Each organ is wrapped in linen, scented with resin, kissed with spells. Each jar is sealed, labeled, protected. Because if one is misplaced, if liver is mistaken for lung, the soul may lose its direction in the duat. You would wander, blind, confused, not knowing which way was sunrise, or which mouth to speak through. Even the heart, the most important of all, is held aside. We'll return to it later. Right now, the body must be hollowed. A vessel emptied of confusion, so it can be filled with eternity. Salt is poured in, natron, a sacred blend of baking soda and desert mineral. It draws out moisture and memory. Over 40 days, the flesh will dry. The skin will shrink. The body will quiet. But the jars must be watched, prayed over, tended to, because the soul will need them again. At the weighing of the heart, at the final gate, and if even one is missing, your eternity will unravel like linen coming loose in a dry wind. The skull is still, the nose untouched, but not for long. This is the quietest part of the ritual and the most unsettling. You are Pharaoh. You ruled armies, raised monuments, commanded the Nile itself. But now, you are a body, a shell, and your brain, your thoughts, your memories, your dreams is about to be discarded. A metal hook, thin and curved like the crescent moon, is inserted into your nostril. Not with violence, with practice. The embalmer twists, breaks the thin bone at the back of your nose. Then stirs. Soft tissue loosens. Gray pulp slides downward. Piece by piece, your brain is drawn out, through the nose, through the passage that once carried your breath. Now you're forgetting. It drips onto linen. No prayers are said, no songs are sung. Because in Egypt, the brain is nothing, just fat, just filler. It does not contain the soul, or the mind, or the will. That belongs to the heart. The heart ib in the sacred tongue is the true self. It feels, it remembers, it confesses. And so, while the brain is thrown away, the heart is preserved, wrapped in linen, smeared in resin, cradled like a child, because one day it must stand trial. In the hall of two truths, your heart will be placed on a golden scale. Opposite it, the feather of Ma'at, goddess of justice. If your heart is heavy with guilt, with lies, with cruelty, it will sink, and the beast Ammit will devour it, forever. But if your heart is light, pure, balanced, you pass. You walk into eternity. That is why no one dares damage the heart. It is you, even now, even in death. Some pharaohs even had false hearts made carved from stone, engraved with the heart scarab spell. From the book of the dead, do not stand as witness against me. Do not weigh heavy. Do not betray what I was trying to become. You commanded thousands, but in the end it's your own heart that will speak on your behalf. And it does not lie. You will not walk alone. Not through this darkness, because even in death, a pharaoh must travel. And the journey through the Duat, the underworld, is not short or safe. You will need a guide, a map, a book, not one to read, but one to carry. They call it the Book of the Dead, though the name is misleading. It is not a book for the dead. It is a book for the soul, a manual, a lifeline, written over centuries across tomb walls, papyrus scrolls, linen wrappings. Every pharaoh has their own version, tailored, chosen. Your priests select the chapters. Your scribes copy them in red and black ink. Your spells are written in curves and birds and suns and thrones. They begin with protection from snakes, from fire, from the devourer of shadows. Then come the passwords, secret phrases you must recite at each gate, to each guardian, to pass each trial. You practice them before you die. You whisper them in your sleep. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not slain unjustly. You hope that's true. The book includes a spell for not drowning, one for keeping your heart quiet, one for turning into a falcon, one for remembering your name. Because in the duat you can forget your name, your form, your purpose. The stars don't shine there. Time collapses, you might meet yourself, or your enemy, or something older. So you cling to the words. The book is buried with you, wrapped in silk, sealed in a lacquered case, placed beside your feet. Some pages are worn. Others glow with gold leaf. There is a page, just one, with a spell so dangerous it's written backwards, so no living eyes can read it in full. You are told not to fear, but you do, because the duat is not a road. It is a riddle, and every answer must be correct, or you vanish. Not die, not sleep, vanish. So you hold the book close, even in the tomb, even in the dark, and you trust with all that remains of your soul that the words will light your way. The tomb is sealed, the spells are spoken, the body rests. But the journey has just begun, because the dua is not only desert and darkness, it is also water, a great celestial river, a sea that splits the world of the living from the realm of judgment. You cannot walk across it, you cannot swim, you must sail. That is why they bury you with a boat, not a toy, not a symbol, a real one, long curved, carved of cedar or sycamore, bound with rope and sealed with pitch. It waits beside your tomb, sometimes above, sometimes beneath, sometimes disassembled and hidden under a false floor. King Khufu Cheops had his buried in pieces beside his pyramid. Over 200 individual planks, 40 meters long when rebuilt, enough to carry a soul across eternity. You will ride it beneath the stars, past gates guarded by lion-headed demons, past waters that boil with forgotten names, past islands where the dead whisper to themselves. But you're not alone. You are accompanied by gods, not all visible, not all kind. Ra, the sun god, sails a boat too. Every night he battles the serpent Apep in the dark beneath the horizon. You may pass him, you may not. It depends on your heart, your memory, your spells. Some pharaohs are buried with model boats' crews of painted men at oars, priests with tiny incense burners, captains with golden rudders. They row in silence, waiting for you to awaken, waiting for the night sea to open. In your dreams, you've seen it, a black river under a blood-red moon. No stars, no shore, only the sound of lapping water and distant chanting in a language older than stone. This is not metaphor. This is real. To an Egyptian soul, more real than daylight. And if the boat is missing, if no one built it, no one thought of it, you are left behind. You sink, you struggle, you are devoured. So they build the boat, they anoint it, they bless it, and they pray you never need to use it. But if you do, it will be ready. They part your lips with a curved blade, not to harm but to prepare, because even in death a pharaoh must speak, not to mortals, but to the gods, and mortal flesh cannot carry immortal sound. So your tongue, your true tongue, is removed, carefully, ceremonially, with the same precision as carving a statue of Ra. There is no pain, not now, but the air shifts in the chamber as if the gods themselves have leaned closer. The tongue is weighed. Was it honest in life? Did it bless, command, seduce, curse? Did it lie? No one answers, not aloud, because what happens next is not about the past, but about eternity. A thin leaf of gold is taken from the sacred box, pressed by hand, shaped with tools carved from bone. Some are flat, some forked, some bear symbols, tiny glyphs etched into their surface, Ma'at. Speak truth, let the soul be heard. The golden tongue is inserted into your mouth, placed not too deep, not too shallow, balanced between silence and song, then sealed with resin and linen, not to silence you, but to preserve your voice for the next world, because in the hall of judgment you must speak. You must name yourself, declare your innocence, recite the 42 negative confessions. You must say, I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not spoken evil of the gods. And if your voice fails, if your tongue is missing, your silence is your guilt. Some pharaohs are buried with more than a golden tongue, a golden palate, golden fingertips, even golden eyelids. They believe if enough of them glows, the gods will listen, or at least hesitate. You remember your own voice, the first time it echoed through the temple hall. You were young. Your command trembled, but everyone obeyed. Now you are silent, but the gold will speak for you. It has no breath, but it carries meaning. It weighs nothing, but it bears your truth. And in the world beyond, where gods judge not what you were, but what you chose to carry into the dark, that may be enough. You are already gone, your body wrapped, your organs sealed, your boat prepared, but the world still needs to see it, so your death is staged, a ritual, a spectacle, a drama performed before gods and men alike. The procession begins at dawn. Drummers walk first, slow, heavy rhythm, then the priests, their white robes fluttering in the Nile wind. Then the mourners. But these are not your family, not all of them. They are professionals, hired voices, women with stained cheeks, torn robes, fingernails caked in ceremonial dirt. They wail in waves, first a soft moan, then sharp, sudden shrieks as if grief itself lashes from their throats. It is music, horrible sacred music. Behind them, dancers sway in time, movements taken from temple rites, arms raised to the sun, bodies bent low to kiss the earth. They don't know you, but they know the rhythm of death. They've performed it many times. Each movement is symbolic, each cry is counted, because the soul listens. And if the mourning is too quiet, too short, too false, you may not hear your own name. And if you don't hear your name, you cannot follow it to the afterlife. Your body is carried on a golden bier, pulled by oxen, flanked by guards with obsidian blades. Children toss lotus petals. A young priest sprinkles milk into the dust to feed the ground beneath you. Your wife walks behind the bier, head down, hands clenched. She does not weep. Not yet. That comes later, when she becomes Isis, and your son becomes Horus. And together they perform the drama of resurrection. She will bare her chest, tear her headdress, scream your name 3 times, not for grief, for magic, because names spoken in ritual pull the soul upward, bind it to memory, light its path. If no one cries, if no one calls out, your spirit is lost. That's why there are flutes. That's why there are actors. That's why there is blood. Yes, sometimes real, slaughtered animals, or in ancient days, even servants. Because in the oldest versions of the rite, a pharaoh was never buried alone. The living followed, to serve, to remind, to die. You will not be alone today. But neither are you truly known. Your death belongs to the gods now. And the script has already been written. Not all crowns are made for the living. Some are forged for the dead, and they are never worn in daylight. You had many crowns in life. The white crown of Upper Egypt, the red crown of Lower Egypt, the double crown uniting both. Each one had its own meaning, each one a weight you carried in front of the world. But this one is different. The Atef crown, or sometimes the Caprish, is only worn once, in death. It's heavier than it looks, lined with gold, studded with lapis lazuli and carnelian. 2 tall feathers rise like twin flames. Between them, a sun disk, not a symbol of rule but of passage. When they place it on your mummified head, they whisper no words. There are no cheers, no applause, only breath held and linen rustling. Because this is not a crown of power. It is a mask, a shield, a signal. It tells the gods you are ready, that you have released the world of men, that your heart has been weighed, that your voice has been gilded, that your name has been sealed. And now you are not just Pharaoh. You are a star among millions. The feathers represent Ma'at, the goddess of truth. Not what you claimed in life, but what you must prove in death. The sun disk means rebirth if you deserve it. The gold. Well, the gold reminds them you were once more than flesh. That you were remembered. Some pharaohs had custom crowns made just for burial, with serpents coiled around them, or falcon wings sweeping back. One even had the glyph for silence engraved beneath the brow, so that even in death his thoughts would remain his own. They say the crown vibrates during the final prayer, not because of magic, but because of breath, the breath of those gathered, holding it together, as if your soul might ride the silence upward like incense curling through stone. You never saw yourself in it. There are no mirrors in the tomb. But if you could, you wouldn't recognize what you see. Because it's not you anymore. It's what you were becoming all along. You are wrapped, you are crowned, you are sealed within your tomb. You should be safe now, but you are not, because there is one fear greater than death, greater than judgment, greater even than forgetting. Being disturbed, your body, the vessel for your soul, must remain whole, untouched, hidden, not because of pride, but because of survival. In Egypt, the soul is not one thing. It is many. Ka, your life force. Ba, your personality. Ren, your name. Shut, your shadow. Ib, your heart. They scatter after death, and only through ritual, through preservation, through memory, can they come back together. But if your mummy is harmed, if the face is damaged, if the wrappings are cut, the reunion cannot happen, and your soul becomes lost, a whisper without a body, a name without a mouth. That is why tombs are hidden. Traps are laid. False doors are carved. Even the name of the deceased is sometimes misspelled on purpose to confuse those who dare to enter. Some pharaohs had multiple coffins nested inside one another, not for luxury but for misdirection. One pharaoh buried his heart in a separate chamber so thieves would never find all of him. But thieves always come, not just for gold, for fame, for secrets, for curses. They break seals, light torches, cut bandages that took weeks to wrap. They lift the mask, they open the mouth. And in that moment, the silence breaks. Some say you can feel it, a pulling, a tearing, as if the air itself flinches. Because the soul does not sleep. It listens, it waits, and when its home is broken, it howls. There are stories of priests dreaming of pharaohs with missing faces, of children muttering forgotten names, of sandstorms rising after tombs are opened. Coincidence maybe. But in Egypt, coincidence is just a word for what we don't dare explain. That is why some tombs have no markings, why some mummies are buried upside down, why one pharaoh requested, "If I cannot be safe, then let no one be." And the ones who disturbed him, they died. Strange deaths, sudden, silent. Your name is still etched in stone. But if your body crumbles, the stone may not be enough. Because immortality isn't about glory, it's about stillness. And stillness once shattered cannot always be repaired. The tomb is dark, the air still. But your name must keep moving. Because in Egypt, death is not the end, oblivion is. And the only thing that stands between you and non-existence is sound. A whisper, a syllable, a name spoken aloud. Ren, the true name. Not the one the world called you, but the one etched into the bones of the universe, the one sown into your breath at birth. If your name is spoken, you remain, whole, heard, held. Even if your body is dust, even if your tomb is lost. But if your name is forgotten, you fade. Not like a candle, like a shadow that no longer casts light, like a scar that even the wind won't remember. That is why the ancients carved their names into every wall, on statues, on jars, on combs, on sandals, over and over. In case the body fails, the voice fails, the priests fail. A wall might remember. That is why they wrote songs, funeral hymns that repeated the pharaoh's name dozens of times. Why the Book of the Dead includes spells that say, "May my name never be cut from the stone. May my name live even when I do not." They understood your name is your anchor, your map, your echo. Some rulers tried to erase enemies by erasing their names. They scratched them off monuments, chiseled them from tombs, burned every papyrus where the name was written, because that's how you kill a soul in Egypt, not with a dagger, but with silence. One pharaoh ordered his enemy's name be engraved beneath his sandals, so every step would crush him again, and again, forever. Another built a temple, not for himself, but for the priests who would say his name daily for 1,000 years. Some names survive, not because they ruled wisely, but because someone kept saying them. You're hearing one now, Tutankhamun. His tomb forgotten his name, buried until it was spoken again, and suddenly he lived, in museums, in books, in dreams. So tonight, as you lie in the dark, remember this: you may never build a pyramid, but if someone says your name with love, with memory, with breath, you are not gone. Not truly. She was born a princess, daughter of a pharaoh, raised among silk scriptures and sacred incense. But she didn't stop there. She became king. Her name was Hatshepsut, and she did something few women dared. She didn't rule beside a man. She didn't whisper behind a curtain. She took the throne, and with it, she took a beard, a false one, braided, curved, worn proudly beneath her chin. She wore the crown of kings, not queens. She called herself Son of Ra, not daughter, not wife, not consort, because in Egypt there was no word for female pharaoh. So she became the male one. Her statues show broad shoulders, a square jaw, even the traditional kilt. But look closer, and you see it, the hint of curve in her cheek, the grace in her brow. She didn't pretend to be a man. She redefined what a king could look like. Under her reign, Egypt flourished. Trade boomed, temples rose, peace lasted. She sent ships to the land of Punt, bringing back incense, ebony gold, and living myrrh trees. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, a cascade of colonnades and cliffs, still stands. Still speaks, but power, even great power, cannot protect you from being forgotten, or worse, erased. After her death, someone tried to remove her from history. Statues smashed, cartouches chipped away, names scratched off like dried ink, not by an enemy, but by someone close, possibly her stepson, Thutmose III. They didn't destroy everything, just enough. Enough to confuse, to cast doubt, to silence. But Egypt remembers, the stone remembers, and in the 19th century, her name returned. Archaeologists puzzled over the missing king who ruled with such elegance, such power, and left no son behind. Then they looked deeper, and found her, the woman who became king, the pharaoh who wore a beard not to hide, but to rule, the one who stood before gods, not as wife, not as mother, but as sovereign. She still whispers from the walls, from the cliffs, from the golden dust of Thebes, not just because we found her tomb, but because we said her name, Hatshepsut. The gods had ruled Egypt for millennia, hundreds of them. Falcons, cats, crocodiles, jackals, beetles, stars, each one with a temple, a priesthood, a story etched in stone, until one pharaoh said no more. His name was Akhenaten, but it wasn't the name he was born with. He was Amenhotep IV, son of a long, God-fearing dynasty, until he changed everything. He didn't just worship a new god, he erased the others. Gone were Amun, Osiris, Horus, Thoth. He declared them false, empty, corrupt. In their place he raised a single disk of light atop the sun. Not a person, not an animal, just a glowing circle. He moved the capital, built a new city, Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. He filled it with temples open to the sky. No roofs, no statues, no secrets. He wrote hymns praising Aten. He banned images of other gods. He scratched their names off temple walls. Even the word gods became singular. Priests who once held power were left with silence, their rituals unneeded, their offerings ignored. Imagine the fear, the confusion, centuries of belief wiped away by royal decree. But Akhenaten didn't stop there. He changed art. Figures became elongated, almost alien, bellies swollen, skulls stretched, even his own image distorted, soft, surreal. Some say he was ill. Others say it was symbolic, a way to appear both male and female, a divine blend. And beside him stood Nefertiti, his queen, his partner in revolution. Together they ruled in golden light and golden silence. But when he died, his revolution unraveled. The temples to Aten crumbled. The capital was abandoned. The priests of Amun returned with vengeance. They erased his name, his city, his lineage. Even his tomb was hidden. He became the heretic pharaoh, a ghost in the record, a warning. And yet, his ideas survived. Monotheism, the power of one light, one truth. It would echo in other lands, other scriptures, other gods. Tonight, if you whisper Akhenaten into the dark, you're saying a name once forbidden, once feared, once burned, but still alive. You see his statue and pause. It doesn't look like a pharaoh. Not the kind you're used to. Not the kind carved with square jaws, broad shoulders, perfect symmetry. This one is different. A long face, sloping eyes, a chin that seems to stretch like wax under heat, a torso, soft, curved, almost feminine. It is Akhenaten again, but not as you imagined him. The body is not heroic. It is strange, not muscular, but swollen. The hips, wide, the stomach, round the limbs, fragile. It defies the style of centuries, and no one agrees why. Some say it was real, a genetic disorder, Marfan syndrome, or Froelich's, a hormone imbalance. Perhaps he was sick, or deformed, or aging rapidly in his final years. But others say no, this was not sickness, it was symbolism. A pharaoh who wanted to look like both man and woman. Sun and moon, flesh and God, to reflect the unity of Aten, the single, genderless sun. A being beyond form, beyond duality, so he carved himself in this new image, alien, soft, dreamlike, as if light had melted his bones and left only the essence of self. Even his children are depicted this way, big heads, long limbs, their skulls too round, too smooth. People whisper they weren't human, or not entirely. Even today, some theorists, the fringe kind, say he came from the stars, that Akhenaten was a visitor, an emissary of some celestial intelligence who tried to steer Egypt toward monotheism and left before the plan was complete. The evidence, the statues, the sun cult, the sudden changes, but even without aliens, his image remains unsettling. Not frightening, just off, a shape that doesn't belong to this world or the next. Some say that's the point. He wanted to be remembered, not as a man, but as an idea, a body remade in light, a king of strangeness, a god of one. And it worked, because you're still thinking about him, not what he did, but what he looked like, what he might have meant, what he might still mean. In Egypt, the shape of the body was never just about anatomy. It was about power, message, myth, and Akhenaten. He shaped his myth into something no one could ignore, not even now. He was just a boy, 9 years old, too small for the throne, too young to wear the crown of gods. But he did. His name was Tutankhamun. The world calls him King Tut, the boy king. He came after chaos, after Akhenaten, after the sun temples were emptied and the old gods returned. He was the symbol of healing, of restoration. His name once meant living image of Aten, but they changed it to living image of Amun. Even his name had to be corrected, rewired to fit the world again. He did not rule. Others did, regents, priests, generals. He was carried, guided, spoken for. But still he was Pharaoh. He was worshipped, painted, dressed in gold, and then he died at 18, or maybe 19. No great battle, no famous illness, just gone. So quietly it startled the nation. They buried him in haste. His tomb was small, not fit for a king. Some of the paint was still wet when they sealed it. Why the rush theories bloom like desert flowers. A broken leg, found in his x-rays, shattered just above the knee. Infection maybe, sepsis, a blow to the head. A thin fracture at the base of his skull. Accident, murder, malaria. Found in traces of his DNA. The fever could have weakened him, left him vulnerable. Or maybe he was never meant to live long. Maybe he was a placeholder, a thread connecting two dynasties, a child with royal blood and too many expectations. In his tomb, they found walking sticks, over 100. Some worn at the tips as if he used them, not just kept them. Did he limp? Was he in pain? His spine was curved, his foot deformed, his teeth crooked. He was not the golden god the tomb paints him to be. But in death, he became eternal. Because they found him. In 1922, his tomb was uncovered, untouched, unlooted. A miracle. Inside gold. Chariots, daggers, thrones, even his sandals. And of course his face. Shining from the burial mask. Eyes outlined in obsidian. Lips soft, still unknowing. The world fell in love. With the mask, the mystery, the idea. Tutankhamun, the boy who ruled, died, and returned not through magic, but through memory. You may not remember what he did, but you remember his name, and maybe that's enough. It started with a door, sealed, unopened for over 3000 years. The year was 1922. The man was Howard Carter. And the tomb Tutankhamun. The moment the seal broke, the world changed. Inside, untouched wonder. Chariots, statues, daggers of meteoric iron. And that golden mask, silent and radiant. But beauty wasn't all they found. Within months, people started to die. First Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the excavation. A mosquito bite on his cheek became infected. He died of blood poisoning. The lights in Cairo flickered and went out the moment he passed. Coincidence then came more. Carnarvon's brother, his personal secretary, the radiologist who x-rayed the mummy, a visitor who joked about the curse, a prince who dared touch a sacred relic. Each death sudden, unexpected, unexplained. Newspapers ran with it, the curse of the Pharaoh. They wrote of inscriptions on the tomb, warnings to intruders, vengeance from beyond. Some said the tomb was lined with poisons. Ancient mold, air-sealed too long. But others whispered older things, that names once silenced should stay that way, that the dead do not forgive curiosity. Even Carter's own pet canary was said to have been eaten by a cobra, the sacred snake of kings, on the day the tomb opened. But Carter lived. Years longer, as did many on his team. So was the curse real or just fear wrapped in coincidence? Historians say no. Statisticians say no. But deep down, you wonder. Because Egypt doesn't forget, and it doesn't always forgive. Maybe it wasn't the mummy. Maybe it was the disruption, the flashbulbs, the shouting, the chisels against centuries of silence, the body of a boy who never asked to be found suddenly on display, shipped, scanned, speculated upon. Maybe the curse wasn't punishment, but grief. Grief with nowhere to go. You're safe, of course. You're not in that tomb. You didn't take anything. You're only listening. But still, if you close your eyes now, just for a moment, you might hear sand shifting, or breath behind stone. And wonder, was it really just a story, or something still waiting just beneath the gold? He was Pharaoh, crowned, worshipped, wrapped in gold and incense. But for much of his life, he was just a boy in a room full of adults who spoke for him. Tutankhamun ascended the throne at just 9 years old. His name echoed in temples. But the voice was not his. It was theirs, the regents, the priests, the generals, and maybe his stepmother. Some say it was Nefertiti, still powerful even after Akhenaten's death. Others say it was the high priest Ai, a man always near the throne, but never quite on it until later. They called him Tutankhaten, first child of the sun god Aten. But not long after they changed it, Tutankhamun, child of Amun. A shift in name, a shift in gods, a shift in power. He was a symbol, a bridge back to the old religion, to Amun's priests, to tradition. He signed decrees written by other hands. He ruled over rituals designed before his birth. They placed him beside adult queens, painted him towering serene even when he still needed help mounting a chariot. He was Pharaoh, but also a pawn, and in that he was not alone. Many rulers wore the crown before they could read the scrolls that justified it. But Tutankhamun's case feels especially tender, because behind the golden mask we found a fragile boy. His spine was bent, his foot malformed. He likely walked with a cane, possibly with pain. We found over 130 walking sticks in his tomb. Some were worn down from use, not props, not symbols, tools of a boy just trying to stand tall. They gave him wives, painted him hunting, gave him gods to pray to. But did anyone ask what he believed? Did anyone listen when he spoke? Or was every whisper of his echoed louder by those with more age, more ambition? His death at 18 left no heir, no legacy but the silence of a sealed tomb. Yet today, he is remembered more than almost any pharaoh before him, not for battles, not for buildings, but because he was found, because history paused and looked into his mask and saw a boy made into a god before he had the chance to become a man. She was called the most beautiful face in Egypt, Nefertiti. Her name means the beautiful one has come, and for a while, she ruled the world, not from the shadows, not from behind a veil, but beside her husband, Akhenaten, not as queen, as co-ruler, equal, visible. Her face is immortal now, a limestone bust painted over 3000 years ago, still gazing into eternity with perfect symmetry, cheekbones like sculpture, eyes outlined in kohl, a neck long and elegant as if meant for poetry. But behind the beauty, there was power. She appeared in royal ceremonies, participated in religious reforms. Some reliefs even show her smashing enemies beside the king, a role no queen had taken before. She bore 6 daughters, possibly a son. Some scholars think she even ruled after Akhenaten's death under another name. Neferneferuaten, a female pharaoh, in all but title. Then, she vanished. No record of her death, no tomb, no mummy, just absence. Later, kings made no mention of her, as if she had never existed. Theories abound. Some say she died in childbirth, others in disgrace. Some say she became pharaoh in disguise and was erased like Hatshepsut, a woman too bold for memory. Or maybe the priests removed her as part of their revenge against Akhenaten's heresy. To cleanse the past, they had to scrub her from it. But stone is stubborn, and beauty more so. Her bust was found in 1912 in an artist's workshop in Amarna. Not in a palace, not a temple, a studio, abandoned, unfinished, hidden. Yet it survived, one eye missing, but the other still watching. Today, millions recognize her face, even if they don't know her story. The queen who ruled beside the sun and was swallowed by the dark. But darkness is not silence, and memory is not always written. Sometimes it's painted, chiseled, carried in the curve of a smile that refuses to fade. Say her name softly now, Nefertiti. Let her return, not as an ornament, but as a ruler who dared too much and paid the price in absence. His name was Ramses I, not the most famous Ramses, not the builder of great temples, not the one with colossal statues. He was the last, the final pharaoh before Egypt's crown split and faded into memory. He still wore the title, still performed the rites, still signed decrees with a sacred cartouche. But power was already gone. By the time Ramses I took the throne, Egypt was crumbling. The great dynasties were behind them. The treasury was dry. Temples were looted. Tombs, even royal ones, were robbed by hungry hands. Floods came late. Crops failed. People whispered of angry gods and absent kings. But Ramses stayed quiet. He ruled from the shadows, rarely appearing in public, rarely performing the festivals that once brought thousands to the streets. Because in truth, he no longer ruled. The real power now sat with the priests of Amun, especially in Thebes. Men in white linen who controlled land labor, wealth, and belief. They were no longer servants of the state. They were the state. Some say Ramses I fled the south entirely unable to compete with the religious power rising like floodwater. He stayed in the north, far from the old capitals, like a ghost king. He wasn't overthrown, not officially. He just became irrelevant. And when he died, there was no grand pyramid, no valley of kings, no chorus of mourners stretching for miles. His death marked the end of the new kingdom, the last age of Egypt's greatness. What came next was division, civil war, foreign rule, Libyans, Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans. The throne of Horus became a memory passed from hand to hand, a title without a soul. But Ramses I still matters, because he was the last to carry the name Pharaoh before it became a relic. He is a bookmark, a final sigh at the end of a long golden sentence. Sometimes it is not the fall that echoes, but the silence that follows. So remember him, not for what he did, but for what he couldn't stop. A king who watched the sun set on a civilization too vast to hold together. He wore the crown, held the scepter, walked the sacred halls. But you don't remember his name? No one does. His face is lost, his tomb unknown, his cartouche erased. He was a pharaoh, and yet he became nothing. Not all kings are remembered. Not all kings are buried with gold. Some are buried in silence. Maybe he ruled during a time of drought. Maybe a rebellion. Maybe he made one mistake too many, or trusted one priest too much. History doesn't say, because history didn't keep him. His body was never found. Or maybe it was in a nameless pit, wrapped in linen, stiff with age, but no amulet, no book, no magic. In ancient Egypt, to die without proper rites was to die twice. First, the body fades, then the name. And without the name, your soul cannot find the stars. The Ba cannot return. The Ka cannot rest. The heart cannot be weighed. No spells, no gates, no sunrise in the afterlife. Just drifting. Forever. His tomb may have collapsed, or been raided before the paint dried. Perhaps a usurper took his place, recarved his face, scratched, his name claimed his glory. That happened more often than you think. Or maybe he was buried hastily during plague, during war. No mourners, no chants, no tears. In Egypt, a pharaoh must be mourned aloud, called by name, remembered in song. Because forgetting is the true death, and so he is gone. No face in the museum, no statue by the Nile, no documentary voiceover telling his story. Just the faint chance that someone somewhere once loved him, that a servant whispered his name before covering his face with cloth, that a wife left a charm under his pillow before fleeing the palace, that a child spoke his name one last time before being told to forget. And now there is you, lying still, listening. And even if you don't know his name, you know what he felt, to be overlooked, to be passed by, to wonder if anyone will speak of you when you're no longer here, and in knowing that maybe he's not gone completely, maybe in this moment his soul stirs and feels a little less alone. You didn't want this. Not really. You were a child, still learning to steady your hand when pouring water, still afraid of the dark corners of the palace, still wondering why the grown-ups stopped smiling when you entered a room. Then they told you, you are Pharaoh, chosen by the gods, son of Ra, heir to an empire carved by blood and belief. And maybe you believed them. At first, they dressed you in linen, painted your eyes with kohl, placed a crown too heavy for your neck onto a head still soft with baby curls. You sat on a throne with your feet not yet touching the floor. They said it was destiny, that the gods had spoken. But you didn't hear anything. No voice in the stars, no whisper in your dreams. Just the pressure of robes too tight and the echo of sandals shuffling as courtiers bowed low. And so you ruled. Or they ruled through you. Each decree you signed was already written. Each ritual you performed already rehearsed by others. You became a symbol, a statue that breathed, a sacred puppet. Some envied you, saw only gold and feasts and power. But you knew. That crown came with watchers and whisperers and poisoners. Each smile might hide a dagger, each prayer a curse. You weren't allowed to play, to love freely, to cry. You were not a boy, not a man, not even a person. You were an idea. And ideas don't sleep. They don't bleed. They don't get to run away, even when you wanted to, even when you stood at the edge of your palace balcony, watching the desert stretch into forever, wondering if it would let you disappear. But the desert had eyes, and the gods had ears, and the crown had claws, and so you stayed, grew into the role, carved yourself to fit it, and maybe, one day you forgot what it felt like to be just you, to laugh without watching who hears, to eat without fearing the taste, to dream without prophecy. You were not Pharaoh because you were born for it. You were Pharaoh because you couldn't say no, because the system needed a face, and you were convenient. So you smiled, and lifted the crook and flail, and walked like a god even when your knees trembled, because escape was never an option. You were Pharaoh, the most powerful man in Egypt, and yet, each night you weren't alone. The throne was yours, but the bed that was shared, not with one, not with two, but with hundreds. They called it the harem. But it wasn't what you think. It wasn't soft silk and laughter. It was a chamber of politics wrapped in perfume. You walked through the garden lotus, blooming myrrh hanging in the air, and they watched you, 300 women, perhaps more. Some foreign princesses sent as tokens of peace, some daughters of nobles, their futures traded for status, some priestesses, some dancers, some spies. And each night someone was chosen, but not always by you. The queen mother, the high priest, even a trusted steward might suggest the name. Sometimes you remembered their faces, sometimes not. You'd hear a voice in the dark, a song in a language you didn't speak, a hand trembling slightly as it reached for yours, and always the same silence afterward. Because in this world, love was dangerous. A favorite could become a rival. A child born from desire might grow into a threat. So you learned to be careful, to show affection without preference, to give gifts but not too many, to smile but not promise. Still, they dreamed. Each woman who walked the corridors of the inner palace dreamed of one thing, a son, not just for love, but for power. To bear the next king meant immortality, not in heaven, but in the annals of Egypt. Some prayed, some poisoned, some plotted. You once found a charm hidden under your pillow, a knot of red thread, a small carved frog, for fertility or for sickness you didn't know. So you stopped sleeping deeply, and when a woman came to your chambers, you watched her eyes more than her movements. Because even softness could be a weapon, even kisses could mean ambition, even whispers might echo beyond stone, and yet, sometimes in those rare nights of quiet when no gods were watching and no priests were near you, remembered what it was like to be held without calculation. Just two people wrapped in warmth beneath linen sheets that smelled of rosewater and salt. But by dawn the crown returned, the mask, the ritual, and she, whoever she was, would vanish into the garden mist like a forgotten dream. She was called the Great Royal Wife. not because she was loved most, but because she had to be. Her name was carved first, her seat placed nearest the throne, her crown taller, heavier rimmed with cobras and lilies. She was chosen. By birth, by blood, by law. Not always by the Pharaoh's heart. Sometimes she was his sister. A union arranged to preserve the royal line. Sometimes she was a political gift, a way to unite rival houses. And sometimes she was there simply because someone had to be. Her job wasn't to smile. It was to manage. She ruled the harem, oversaw rituals, inspected offerings, organized festivals, kept track of lineage. She was power, not perfume. But she also had enemies. The other women, the younger ones, the quiet ones who entered the Pharaoh's chamber when the oil lamps dimmed. She knew their names, she knew their smells, and she knew the Pharaoh didn't always return from them the same. But she said nothing, because to speak was to show weakness. To accuse was to invite suspicion. So she learned to survive with silence. Sometimes she wept, but not aloud. Her eyes burned, but her lips stayed firm. A queen cannot cry where servants can see. You once stood beside her in the heat of noon as she offered wine to Amun with steady hands. Your arm brushed hers. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She simply whispered, "Drink." And let them think you believe. You never forgot that. She taught you how to rule with a straight spine and a guarded heart. You loved others, that's true. The singer with soft hands, the priestess with curious eyes, the foreign princess who smelled of cedar and honey. But none of them stood beside you during the famines, the plagues, the funerals. Only her. You never said it, not once. But late at night, when dreams grew heavy and the gods slept, you wished you could have chosen her for love instead of necessity. And perhaps she wished the same. But neither of you did, because in Egypt duty always speaks louder than the heart, and history remembers titles, not tenderness. There was no laughter in that room, no warm welcome, no songs, only the scent of resin, the hushed rhythm of a prayer, and the clinking of clay bowls, one now filled with fresh blood. Giving birth in ancient Egypt was never just about life. It was about ritual, about balance, about the divine. When a concubine or queen became pregnant, the palace changed. Her body no longer belonged to her. It became a vessel, a sacred object, a symbol of legacy or threat. She was isolated for 40 days before labor, kept indoors, unseen by men, untouched by stone. Her words were rationed like incense. She spoke only at dawn, never after sunset. Before the birth, she was anointed with mandrake oil, with crushed pomegranate bark, with the ashes of sacred texts burned into powder. The midwife was not just a healer. She was a priestess, a seer, a gatekeeper between this world and the next. A mirror was placed face down beneath the bed to keep wandering spirits from entering. Incense was burned, the room filled with the thick scent of crocodile dung and myrrh. And then the moment came. No one was allowed to scream. Not the mother, not the assistants, not the gods. To curse in pain was to defile the ritual. To cry out was to invite chaos. So they bit cloth, pressed their heads to stone, prayed with clenched jaws and teary eyes. If the labor turned bloody, a sparrow was killed and placed beneath the bed to offer one soul for another. And outside, no one asked questions. No one counted contractions. They waited for a sign. If a red ribbon was laid on the palace gate, there was a child. If two, someone had died. By morning the floors were washed with lotus water. Salt was scattered in the corners, and the linen sheets were burned. The mother, if she lived, was allowed to speak again, but only in whispers, and the child, if it was a boy, was named before sunset. If a girl, the name could wait. There was no celebration, only silence, because in Egypt, birth was not a gift. It was a bargain. You see the child, round cheeks, eyes still learning to blink at candlelight. Tiny fists wrapped in linen bands. The court whispers, a son. But in the back of your mind the question never fades. Is he yours, your Pharaoh? You are the son's chosen. But even the sun doesn't shine in every chamber. You don't remember the night he was conceived. That particular concubine had been chosen by the queen mother, or perhaps by a priest. And now they present you the child like a gift, a future, a name, an heir. But bloodlines in the palace are not written in blood. They're written in politics, whispers, rituals. Some women try to conceive with magic. Crocodile dung, mandrake root, a chant repeated under a full moon. Others cheat more directly. There are tales of palace guards paid in silence, of serving boys forced into shadows, then exiled. And if the baby looks too much like someone else, he's blessed by the gods, and that's the end of it. You remember once receiving a note, anonymous, folded in 7 times, no signature. Just 5 words. It is not your son. You burned it, but the smoke still sits somewhere in your lungs. You watch the boy as he sleeps. His lips twitch. His chest rises and falls. You want to love him. You do. But trust does not come easy when your crown is both a gift and a target. What if he is a trap? What if they are planting a name, a lineage that will one day erase your own? In Egypt, to raise the wrong heir is to build your own tomb. So you keep him close. But not too close. You assign guards. You watch who feeds him. You bless him in public but rarely hold him in private. And still you wonder, will he grow to walk like you, speak like you? Will the gods recognize him as your shadow? Or will they laugh when he enters the underworld, bearing your name but not your truth? You close your eyes, you try to sleep, but in your dreams you hear his voice calling you Father, and it breaks something soft inside you. Because maybe he is yours, and maybe he isn't, but either way, he's the only one who still calls you by that name. You pass them in museums, small figures, smooth stone, smiling mouths, eyes that never blink. They're labeled simply female statue, unknown. Concubine, figure C, 1300 BCE. No name, no title, no history. But they had one. Before they were stone, they were bodies. Women who lived inside the palace walls, who danced by oil light, who whispered songs to themselves when no one was listening. And when they died or disappeared, they were sculpted. Not to be remembered, but to be used. You see, in Egypt, a statue wasn't just decoration. It was a substitute soul. The pharaoh couldn't walk alone in the afterlife. He needed servants, pleasure, comfort, loyalty. So they carved it, in limestone, in wood, in obsidian so polished you can still see your reflection in her eyes. Some were modeled after real women, the favorites, the silenced, their lips painted red, their fingers etched with rings, their backs curved as if they still feared being watched. You wonder, did she know as the sculptor traced her silhouette? Did she sense she was being frozen, turned into something that would follow him, not in love, but in servitude forever? Some statues have gold leaf still clinging to their necks. Others wear anklets carved so delicately you'd think someone remembered the sound of her steps, but her name gone, erased, because names give power. And in death, she wasn't meant to have any. Some figures were buried in tombs clutched in the crook of the pharaoh's arm. Others were placed at the foot of his bed, eyes lifted, as if still waiting to be chosen. And maybe she was. Chosen once, held once, promised something that vanished the moment he turned away. Now her voice is silent, her story smoothed by time, her memory reduced to a line in a catalog. But she's still here. Every time you look into her eyes, dark and shining, you feel it. The trace of a breath. A question, maybe. Do you remember me? You don't. Not fully. But tonight, as the fan hums softly, as the shadows stretch long across your room, as your mind drifts into sleep, you might. In other places, jealousy is a sin, a flaw, a crack in the mirror of love. But in ancient Egypt, jealousy wasn't just accepted. It was sacred. Even the gods burned with it. Isis, goddess of magic, wife of Osiris, once hunted down every woman who dared glance at her husband. She didn't ask questions. She didn't forgive. She turned them into birds, into wind, into silence. And when mortals felt the same heat crawl up their chests, they said, "We are only following the gods." In the palace, jealousy was not whispered. It was acted out through rituals. A concubine dreamed of Pharaoh's death. She was removed from the harem. Not because dreams were dangerous, but because dreams were seen as prophecies. Another gifted a necklace too similar to the queen's. It was taken as a challenge, a spell, a curse wrapped in gold. Once, a woman sang to herself too sweetly by the lotus pool. The queen's guards drowned her. They said her voice was stirring ghosts. No one questioned it. Because when a royal woman acted out of jealousy, it wasn't crime. It was divine protection. A reenactment of the cosmic struggle between order and chaos. There were spells for it, actual chants to bind the heart of a rival or mute her mouth for 7 moons. Some used blue lotus paste and smeared it on door frames. Others hid charms beneath sleeping mats. One woman swallowed a carved beetle to curse her rival's fertility. Another burned strands of hair with myrrh and whispered the name of the one she feared. No one confessed. No one apologized, because to be jealous was to care, to guard, to protect what was sacred, even if it meant tearing it apart. Pharaohs knew this. They saw it in their courts, in their bedrooms, in the eyes of 2 women bowing beside the same altar. They didn't intervene. They couldn't, because even gods never stepped between jealousy and power. And sometimes, late at night, they feared it. Not the poison, not the whispers, but the gaze of someone who once loved them and now loved too much. She wore bracelets of lapis, perfumed her wrists with crushed rose and resin. Her smile was warm, her steps soundless. She was not loud. She didn't need to be. Because in ancient Egypt, the deadliest weapons were silk. Some queens never raised their voices. They raised cups, golden goblets filled by trembling servants, pomegranate wine thick and sweet, a honey cake topped with almond dust, dates soaked in syrup, and beneath it all the shadow of something else. A powder ground from a stone no one touched with bare hands, a tincture pressed from the milky white of toad skin. A single drop could still a heartbeat before the second breath. No screams, just stillness. She would not need to run or hide, because who would accuse the great wife, she who performed rites, she who blessed altars, she who sang to Hathor at dawn? But behind temple incense there were other scents. In the royal kitchen some herbs were kept under lock, not because they were rare, but because they were silent. You remember the feast, the laughter, the music, the fig paste with golden raisins. You remember the moment your brother-in-law stood, raised a toast, and collapsed before the second sip. They said it was heat, exhaustion, a weak heart. But you knew. You looked at her. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, just tilted her head and said he drank too quickly. Poison was not revenge. It was regulation. It was precision. Some women did it not for hatred, but for order. To remove a rival, to protect a son, to delay succession, to buy time, because in the palace every second was counted in shadows. Some poisons took hours, others just one bite. They were kept in rings, pressed into face powder, mixed into ink used to write letters the king would later lick to seal. And always, always the ones who died seemed peaceful. A stillness mistaken for grace. But the queen knew. She always knew. Because she was taught from girlhood, if you cannot win with favor, you win with silence. She was the one he smiled for. Not the queen, not the priestess, not the wife chosen by the gods, but her. The one with soft laughter. The one who smelled like myrrh and crushed figs. The one who didn't flinch when he spoke like a man, not a king. And so she died. Because in the palace to be loved is to be watched. The concubine who is merely beautiful, she is left alone. The singer who entertains, she is ignored. But the one who makes him pause mid-ritual, who makes him late for counsel, who makes him write poems and forget protocol, she becomes a problem. At first, it's small. She is moved to lesser quarters. Her meals arrive late, her maid disappears. Then come the rumors that she practices love spells, that she cursed the queen's womb, that she whispered the Pharaoh's name too many times while bathing. Then, the accident. A fall down 3 steps, a fever no physician can cure, a drink she didn't ask for, and when she dies quietly without spectacle, the temple bells do not ring. But the king knows. He knows because he cannot smell her anymore, cannot hear her humming, cannot see the ribbon she tied around her left wrist. He sits in the sanctuary, alone, still in full regalia, and stares at the statue of Hathor, goddess of love. He does not pray. He does not cry. He simply says, let her be remembered somewhere the sand can't reach. But the scribes won't write her name. The sculptors won't carve her face. She was never official, never given the title that would preserve her. She exists now only in the margins, a faded perfume, a love letter hidden in a scroll of tax records, a song no one sings anymore. because the most loved, the ones who reach the softest parts of the Pharaoh's heart. They are the ones who vanish first, not because they were weak, but because their presence made the king too human. And Egypt could not afford a pharaoh who truly loved. You would never find her tomb unless you already knew where to look. It isn't near the pharaoh's resting place, not under the shadow of a pyramid, not guarded by jackal-headed statues or sacred curses. It's miles away near a bend in the Nile where reeds grow wild and the wind carries the scent of mud and crushed lilies. There, carved into the side of a low cliff hidden behind what looks like a shepherd's shelter, is the resting place of a woman who once touched a king's heart. Not his queen, not his heir's mother, but someone else. Someone whose name was whispered, not proclaimed, whose fingers once braided his hair by candlelight, whose voice soft and low lulled him to sleep after nights too heavy with politics and prophecy. When she died, they didn't bury her with honor. But he remembered. He sent a mason, in the dark of night, with no royal seal. The tomb was carved modestly, no gold, no fanfare, just enough room for one body and a handful of offerings, a mirror, a wooden comb, a faded sash with his scent still clinging to the threads. Inside, on one of the walls, there's a single painting. It shows two hands, reaching, not clasping, just reaching, as if frozen in the moment before touch. No name, no date, no claims of divinity. Just two colors, ochre and blue, and the silence of everything that had to be hidden. And beside it, etched in a corner too low for easy eyes, just 6 words in hieratic script. May your breath find mine again. No tomb guard protects it. No offering table stands at the entrance. But if you go there on a quiet night and sit still long enough, you might hear it. Not a ghost, not a whisper. Just the wind through reeds, like a sigh, like a memory, like someone still waiting to be remembered in the softest way. They called her no name. They gave her no title. She had no statue, no jewelry, no portrait. But she lived. She lived longer than the others. In the palace of sighs and silk where beauty meant risk and attention meant danger, she learned to disappear. Not by running, but by staying invisible where everyone could see her. She was polite, but never charming. Clean, but never scented. She sang, but only with others. She smiled, but never first. She didn't argue, didn't flirt, didn't try to move up. She was always just behind another, never in front, never beside the pharaoh, never whispered about. And so she lived, through feasts poisoned with honey, through nights when guards changed their posts too suddenly, through screams in the hallway followed by silence that lingered for days. She folded linens, watered lotus plants, braided the hair of women who vanished before the season changed. She never asked questions, never refused commands, never made eye contact too long. And slowly, she faded from memory, even while still alive. Some called her the quiet one. Others didn't call her anything at all. But she noticed everything. Which concubine had new bracelets? Which queen's servant looked more tired? Which priest turned his head a little too fast when someone said, "Curse"? She took it all in, and gave back nothing. She learned to sleep with one ear open, to cry without noise, to walk with soft feet even across stone. And when she finally died, old, thin, unmarked, no one fought over her things. No one summoned a priest. She was wrapped in simple cloth, buried under the servants' garden, near the fig tree where the soil stayed cool. No amulets, no statues, no spell from the Book of the Dead. But she was remembered. By wind, by insects, by the fig tree that grew stronger that year. Some say that's the only way women truly survived in the palace of kings, by not being seen, by not being wanted, by not being remembered. But tonight you remember her. You've given her a space in your mind, in your breath, and maybe in some quiet, dusty part of the Duat she feels it, and finally sleeps. You wore it beneath your robe, tied tight with sinew, pressed against your chest like a second heartbeat, not for luck. Not for beauty, to survive. In the palaces of Egypt, amulets weren't decorations. They were armor. There were amulets to silence whispers, to confuse assassins, to turn poison into water, to keep your name from being spoken by the wrong mouth. Some were carved in haste by temple scribes, ink still wet. Others handed down wrapped in the hair of grandmothers who had also survived palaces' pharaohs' rivals. You didn't display them. You hid them in your sandal, in your sash, stitched inside your sleeve, where only your skin could feel them pulse. Because it wasn't about believing. It was about not being alone. The gods may not always listen, but a stone shaped like an eye or a bone rubbed with cedar oil that could still whisper on your behalf. Some amulets were just words, folded papyrus inked with the names of 6 protective spirits, each written in reverse so demons couldn't read them aloud. Others were animals, frogs, cobras, beetles, suspended in resin, buried in the lining of your bedding so that no dream could be touched without their permission. You'd never talk about them. Not to the queen, not even to your mother, because if someone knew what you carried, they could craft the counterspell. And then you'd be naked. One girl kept hers beneath her tongue. She died with it still there. When they opened her mouth, the priest gasped and stepped back. She was ready, he said. Amulets weren't holy. They were practical, like locks, like sharp objects hidden in your pillow, like a coin pressed into your palm that no one else could see. Every servant had one, every concubine, even pharaohs, especially pharaohs, because when you're never alone, when everyone bows but no one tells the truth, when your food tastes strange and your dreams feel borrowed, you learn to hold something tighter than trust, something that might not save you, but might slow down whatever hunts you in the dark. And sometimes that's enough. You didn't need incense, or a temple, or a knife. Sometimes just a whisper was enough. In ancient Egypt, words weren't just sounds. They had weight, shape, direction. A name spoken the wrong way at the wrong hour could bend fate. A sentence repeated 3 times, each time softer than before, could seal a door, or open it. You were taught this early. Never say the Pharaoh's name after sunset. Never joke about drowning. Never curse in a room with still water, because even the air listens, and sometimes answers. There were whispers meant to soothe fevers, to turn away storms, to help a womb hold on to a child. But there were others, a phrase spoken just before dawn, in the ear of a rival servant, and suddenly she forgets what she was carrying. A chant repeated as you rub oil into your mistress's skin, and her dreams become muddled, restless, sharp-edged. One phrase, just one, carried on your breath while you braid another woman's hair, and her name begins to vanish from others' tongues. Pharaohs themselves used this. Some would not speak before the sun touched the horizon, fearful their words might turn into something too real. Others had scribes trained in reverse-speaking whispers, crafted to undo oaths or erase binding words. There was a belief what is spoken in the right rhythm becomes part of the world, which meant a lie, if sung sweetly enough, could become true, and so people learned to fear even compliments. Was that praise or a trap? Was that blessing on your child or a curse to make them weak? You watched mouths, not just lips but breath. Was it warm? Did it carry weight? Did it hang in the air just a little too long because you knew words don't vanish? They nest, they coil. They grow legs in the dark and come back when no one is listening. So you speak carefully. You speak slowly. You whisper only when you must. And when you lie awake at night, hearing something just outside your door, not footsteps, not voices, but breath, you wonder, did I say something I shouldn't have? They weren't for beauty. They weren't for show. Most were never seen at all. In ancient Egypt, a tattoo was a seal, a ritual, a vow, a spell written in skin. Not everyone had them, only a few. Dancers, priestesses, funerary servants, healers, and sometimes a pharaoh. The ink wasn't black, it was ash. Charcoal mixed with wine, with oil from crushed seeds, and sometimes ashes of the dead, pressed into the skin with bone or bronze. Always in silence, always in darkness. Because the gods were listening, and they had to approve. Where the ink went mattered more than what it looked like. A line beneath the left breast meant protection from betrayal. A spiral behind the ear was said to ward off whispers. A knot on the inner wrist bound the soul in place so it couldn't be stolen while you slept. They weren't art, they were anchors. Some bore the eye of Horus etched so small you could cover it with a thumb. Others carried symbols known only to temple scribes, a fish with 2 tails, a broken lotus, a star with 1 missing point. They marked power, but not the loud kind. The quiet, hidden kind, power that worked in dreams, power that remembered you when no one else did. And they hurt, they bled. Some became infected, but those who bore them accepted it, because pain meant the gods had touched you, had claimed you. In the palace, a concubine with tattoos was both feared and needed. She might dance differently, sleep without dreams, hear things. They said her blood knew when someone was lying, that her touch could cool a fever, that she never stayed in one room too long because walls began to whisper back. There was one story of a servant girl tattooed as a child by an old priest who vanished the next day. No one knew what her marks meant, not even her, but she never aged, not really. And when she finally died after 3 pharaohs and the sun dimmed for 3 days, no one dared bury her. They burned her room, sealed the walls, and the dust still carries her scent. Tonight you wonder if someone marked your skin with sacred lines, would you feel safer or more exposed, because once something's written into flesh, it never fully leaves. You don't look the gods in the eye, even when they're made of stone, because in ancient Egypt, a statue wasn't a symbol. It was a body, and bodies must be cared for. So every week, quietly, precisely, the priests would enter the sanctuary before the sun rose, barefoot, bathed. Mouths rinsed with natron hands perfumed with lotus oil. And there, behind the curtain, where no commoner ever stepped, waited the god. Stone, gold, wood sometimes, but to them alive. Not just art, not just idol. It had been opened during its consecration, eyes unsealed with ritual mouth, touched with sacred blade, so it could breathe, see, and hear. And now it needed care. The priest would whisper the name of the god, then bow, then begin. First the bath-warm water with crushed petals poured gently from copper jugs. They washed the statue as if washing a child, as if it could flinch, as if it might remember. Next oil, rubbing fragrant balm into the carved limbs so the god's skin would stay soft in spirit. Then came the dressing. Linen robes carefully folded, lifted with both hands like sacred texts. Each god had preferences. Some preferred blue sashes, others like gold bands wrapped 3 times no more. If a thread was torn, the ritual had to be repeated. And then the makeup. Yes, even stone gods had coal painted under their eyes, to honor the sun, to sharpen vision, to reflect eternity. It was never rushed, never skipped, because if the statue wasn't washed, the god might feel neglected, might turn away, might curse the crops, or let enemies through the gate, and so they were tended, clothed, adored, then reveiled behind curtains until the next week. No one else saw them, not even Pharaoh, not directly. Some priests said the gods changed when no one was watching, that their postures shifted, that their faces grew softer or sterner, that sometimes the linen was warm before the priest even touched it. But they never spoke of it, because the gods, even when naked stone, deserved privacy. And maybe tonight you can imagine it, a room lit only by oil lamps. A figure bowing to a statue, their hands trembling slightly as they tie a sash around the waist of something that just might be breathing. You wake in the middle of the night, not to a voice, not to a breeze, to the soft, slow sound of something dragging itself across stone. You don't move, you don't breathe. You already know. It's a snake. But you don't scream, you don't call the guards, you don't crush it with your sandal. Because this is Egypt, and snakes aren't just creatures, they're messages. Sometimes they are Wadjet, the goddess of kingship, the protector of the crown. She appears with eyes like gems and scales that shimmer in torchlight. Sometimes they are warnings, not from enemies, from the gods. A serpent at the foot of your bed might mean your words have gone too far, or that someone close has cursed you by nightfall. In the palace, they appear without noise, through cracks, under tapestries, from drains, and you are taught you must not strike them, not even when you're afraid, especially not then, because if you harm one, and it was sacred, and many are, you've not just broken law, you've declared war on the divine. One pharaoh watched a snake curl around his sandal during morning prayer. He froze, waited, and when it slipped away, the priest claimed it was a sign that his soul had been tested and found worthy. Another king ordered a serpent killed after it startled his wife. The crops failed that year. He died within the month. Coincidence or consequence? The line between the two was thinner than a shed skin. Some priests kept snakes in their chambers, fed them milk, spoke to them as brothers. They believed the snakes listened, and sometimes whispered things back when the room was dark enough. There were spells, too, not to drive them away but to invite them. To crawl near when answers were needed, to show up during dreams. And when you saw one slide beneath your bed, you didn't shudder. You whispered, "I welcome what walks between worlds." You let it pass, watched it disappear, and hoped it wasn't there for someone else you loved. The goblet is filled, cool, clear, shimmering slightly in the morning light, but you do not drink yet, because in ancient Egypt, water wasn't water until it was sung into safety. Even the Pharaoh, even in his own chambers, waited for the soft voice of the cupbearer, a girl with steady hands, trained not in pouring, but in singing. She sings low, 3 notes, a rhythm older than the kingdom itself, a song to Ra, a whisper to Osiris, a promise to the Nile. Only then is the cup lifted. Only then do lips touch the rim. Because water unblessed was a portal. It could carry spirits, echo curses, mirror fears. It could show the wrong face when you look down. It could trap a soul halfway between waking and death. So the song mattered. It didn't have to be beautiful, but it had to be honest, precise, the correct breath between syllables, the pause after the final word. And if the singer faltered, or forgot the verse, or sang out of tune, the water was poured away. Not spilled, never spilled. Returned to the basin, with salt and apology. There were stories of men who drank unsung water. Their dreams became fevered. They forgot their children's names. They woke and couldn't speak. Pharaohs feared such things, so their water-bearers were chosen young, taught first to sing, then to serve. It was an honor and a burden. One wrong note could mean death, not just for the king, but for the singer. There was once a girl whose voice cracked on the second note. The Pharaoh paused, lowered his cup, and said nothing. The next morning, she was gone. No procession, no punishment, just gone. Some say she drank from the wrong goblet herself. And tonight, as you take a sip of your own water, quiet and alone, you wonder, was it sung to does it remember, what does it carry? Because in Egypt, even a drink was never just a drink. It was an invitation, or a farewell. You open your eyes, you're still alive, but what you saw lingers. The dream doesn't fade, it sharpens. A staircase crumbling, a falcon flying backward, your hands covered in honey, but nothing sweet. And before you've even risen from bed, someone is at the door, not with breakfast, with parchment. Because in ancient Egypt, dreams were law. They weren't private, they weren't ignored. They were recorded, studied, judged. Every pharaoh had a dream scribe, someone who sat quietly at dawn, listening, writing. They didn't ask how you felt. They asked what you saw. In what order? What color was the river? Did the lion have 2 eyes? Did you hear your father's name? Because every image was a code, and every code had power. Some dreams were blessings. A boat floating downstream meant safe passage. A full bowl of figs meant abundance. The god Thoth, whispering in your left ear, meant wisdom was arriving. But others were dangerous. If you dreamed of teeth falling, a snake biting its own tail, a dog walking like a man, those were warnings. Dreams like that might mean betrayal, a failed harvest, or your own death within the moon's turning. And so actions had to be taken. A temple consulted, an offering made. A ceremony held in your name without anyone knowing it was for you. Sometimes your own words were hidden, written backwards, or in ink mixed with wine so no one could read them, except the priest and the god who sent the dream. There were books, dream dictionaries with hundreds of images and their meanings. But they never covered everything. Some dreams were new, unseen before. And when that happened, the priest would look up slowly and whisper something is changing. One pharaoh dreamt of walking through water that burned. He ordered the palace floors washed with milk for 7 days. Still he died before the 8th sunrise. Another dreamt of his own statue melting into sand. He ordered it buried before anyone else saw it, then never spoke again. So you learn to sleep lightly, to remember every shadow, to wake with your voice ready to speak what you saw before it slips away. Because if you forget the dream, you might forget the warning. And in Egypt, no warning was ever wasted. The lamp flickers. Your room is quiet. The linen curtains barely move. And still you don't look. Not into the mirror, not after sunset. never after sunset. Because in ancient Egypt, a mirror wasn't just a tool. It wasn't a vanity. It was a gateway, bronze polished until it glowed, held in carved ivory, tied with charm-laced ribbons. It showed more than your face. It showed what followed you. During the day, it was safe. The sun watched over your reflection, made sure nothing else appeared behind your eyes. But at night, something else watched. The priests taught it quietly. The goddesses of the underworld, like Nephthys, like Selket, could slip through light that wasn't their own. And mirrors held light long after it had left the room. So after dusk, you covered them. Silk cloth or linen soaked in cedar oil. Sometimes just a bowl turned upside down over the glass. Because it was said if you looked into a mirror after dark and saw your own face clearly, you were already haunted. If you saw your face shift, age distort, or smile when you didn't, the gods had taken interest. And not kindly. One tale says a royal servant looked into her hand mirror by moonlight. She screamed. Claimed she saw herself asleep, but being watched. She never slept again. Another tells of a pharaoh who used a mirror to summon advice from the gods. He looked too long. His hair turned white overnight. He ordered all palace mirrors broken the next day. But mirrors couldn't be destroyed easily. They remembered too much, and what they saw they kept. So you avoid them. You brush your hair by touch, apply kohl by memory. Let the shadows fall where they may. Better imperfect than invaded. Because once a mirror learns your face in the dark, it might call you back, even after you're gone, even after your tomb is sealed, even after your name is chiseled from stone. One glint, one shine, and your image returns, not as you were, but as you became. And so tonight you leave the mirror turned away, just in case, just until dawn, because you've made it this far. And your face? It still belongs to you. It started soft, just a single note, so faint you thought it might be wind slipping beneath the stone tiles. Then another, rising gently, held in the hush between footsteps and dreams. A song, not loud, not frantic, just there. In the palace of ancient Egypt, people heard singing at night. Not from musicians, not from servants, not from the temples. From nowhere, from everywhere. It was always the same, no words, just a melody. 3 notes, one high one, low one that didn't seem to belong in either world. It came from corridors that had no doors, from stairwells that ended in sealed walls, from the air between 2 columns when no one was near. Guards heard it first. They reported it in trembling voices, then stopped mentioning it at all. Some said it came from beneath the palace where old tunnels curled like sleeping serpents. Others said it came from above where empty chambers housed forgotten gods. It never came from the same place twice, and no one ever found the singer. Not that they tried too hard, because everyone knew the song was not meant to be followed. One girl tried. She was young, curious, beautiful, they said. She walked barefoot after the sound into a hall that hadn't been opened in years. They found her the next morning, asleep, eyes open, mouth smiling. But she never spoke again. She lived, she ate, she breathed, but her voice was gone, taken maybe, or replaced. The palace never stopped the singing. They learned to live with it, to respect it. Some believed it was the soul of a pharaoh, too proud to sleep. Others whispered it was a goddess searching for her lost child. Some simply called it the lullaby of stone. A few brave hearts said they found it comforting, that the song knew their pain, that it reminded them they were never truly alone. And tonight, if you find yourself unable to rest, if the wind seems to hum in your ears, if you hear a note that doesn't quite match the world, don't chase it. Don't rise, don't call out, just listen, just breathe, let the song pass through you like smoke through silk. And when it fades, you'll still be here, but a little more ancient than before. It wasn't always sudden, not for a pharaoh. Sometimes he just knew. Not through doctors, not through wounds, through something quieter, a chill in the halls even when the air was still, a bird landing where none had landed before. A crack in the ceiling that hadn't been there yesterday. In ancient Egypt, death didn't knock. It whispered, and the pharaoh, if he was wise, listened. Some spoke of a taste in the mouth, copper bitter like old coins. Others mentioned dreams that wouldn't fade where they stood, in their tombs watching themselves sleep. It wasn't always fear. Sometimes it was calm. A slowing. A silence. One pharaoh, they said, stopped speaking mid-feast, stared out past the oil lamps, and whispered, "He's here." He rose, walked alone into the inner courtyard, sat down, closed his eyes, and didn't wake again. There were signs, always signs. A jackal crying at noon, milk that soured before it was poured, a statue tilting slightly without being touched. When those signs came, the palace grew quiet. The priest made preparations without asking. A new room was set, not for healing, for transition. Oil warmed, linen counted. The Book of the Dead moved closer to the bed. And the pharaoh, he would sit. He would breathe. He would write nothing, because everything had already been written. One ruler had his coffin brought in days before the end. He ordered no tears, no songs, only one thing: let the mirrors be turned. No one asked what he meant. They turned them. And when he died, it rained. In the desert. For 3 days. Coincidence or farewell? Pharaohs rarely fought the end. They had been preparing for it since the day they took the throne. Because ruling Egypt meant learning that even gods sleep, even kings become dust. And tonight, if your chest feels still, if your eyes flutter without reason, if a thought comes that doesn't belong to you, just breathe. You're not dying. Not yet. But somewhere in history, a king is taking his final breath. And through this story, you're holding his hand, just until the silence comes. The pyramid is still standing thousands of years later, solid, silent, majestic. But no one knows who built it. Not the names, not the faces, not the hands that bled and blistered to raise it stone by stone. Because in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh's name was carved into eternity, but the builders' names were left to dust. And yet they came. Farmers during the flood season, stonecutters from the quarries, artisans, bakers, potters, rope makers. Not slaves, not all. Many were paid, fed, given beer onions bread. But they worked in the sun. They pulled ropes until fingers split. They carried rocks as heavy as memory. They died sometimes under the weight of their labor. And they were buried nearby, in small, neat tombs, with jars of food, with prayers scratched into soft limestone. But not with names. Not most of them. The pyramids weren't meant to remember them, just the king inside. He who never lifted a brick, who never hauled limestone, who never watched his brother fall off a scaffold and vanish beneath sand. Still they built, maybe because they believed in the gods, in the afterlife, in something bigger than themselves. Or maybe they just needed to feed their children. No stories were written about them. No songs, no hieroglyphs on temple walls. But still traces remain. Red handprints on blocks still visible inside narrow tunnels. Chisel marks that curve like smiles. Footprints in dried clay where someone paused to drink. And once a word, scrawled in haste on the side of a stone that would never be seen: "We were here." That's all. A whisper scratched in granite. A breath left in eternity. And tonight, when you hear about kings and monuments and greatness carved in stone, remember the nameless, the sunburnt backs, the calloused hands, the quiet men who never asked to be remembered, but made it possible for someone else to be, because without them, there would be no pyramids, no legends, no gold coffin waiting for the gods, just desert and silence. They walked among the living, but never quite belonged. The embalmers, the ones who touched death so others could pretend it didn't exist. They weren't feared. Not exactly. But no one invited them to weddings, to feasts, to sit too close, because their hands smelled of resin and salt and something else, something that made others' stomachs tighten. Even when they were clean, because you couldn't wash away the smell of death. Not when you've opened 100 bodies. Not when your fingers know the texture of organs half turned to liquid. Not when you've packed natron into mouths that will never speak again. In ancient Egypt, embalmers were necessary, respected, sometimes even sacred, but never embraced. They lived near the edges of cities, in quarters downwind, with linen strips drying like banners and oil stored in clay jars, never quite sealed tight enough. You could smell their homes before you saw them, a mix of incense and things that incense could never quite cover. Their work began with a prayer, not for the dead, for themselves, to protect their souls from wandering too close to the ones they were preparing. Because when you handle the body of a pharaoh, you handle a god, and gods have tempers. One misstep, a cut too deep, a missed recitation, a moment of doubt, and you might carry a curse that follows your shadow until your own death. So they worked carefully, silently. They knew how to lift the brain through the nose without breaking bone. They knew the exact temperature to melt resin without cracking the skin. They knew how to sew a chest closed so that it looked eternally unbroken. But no one ever asked their names. The priest recited the spells. The nobles praised the linen. But the embalmer, he stepped back, vanished into the doorway. Let the living pretend he'd never been there at all. And when he grew old, he died, as he lived quiet alone with fingers stained dark and lungs full of sacred smoke. Some said embalmers had strange dreams, that they woke to whispers, that they were never truly rid of the bodies they'd touched, that when they walked at night, they saw faces in the windows of houses that should have been empty. And still they returned to work, because without them no pharaoh would sleep. They held no titles, wore no gold, walked in silence. But every word they wrote could damn a man's soul for eternity. They were the curse carvers, the scribes of the hidden texts, the craftsmen who knew how to bind a spirit with ink. And they never signed their names, because to create a curse was to call the gods' attention, to craft words so sharp they cut through the veil between life and the afterlife. And in ancient Egypt, that power came with a price. These weren't temple scribes, not the men who copied hymns, not the scholars of the stars. These were shadow priests, inksmiths, chosen not for their piety, but for their precision. They were called in when a pharaoh feared betrayal, when a tomb needed protection from hands not yet born. They wrote on limestone, on papyrus, on the inside of sarcophagus lids, places no one would see unless they'd already broken sacred law. The curses weren't long, just enough to say, "May your fingers turn to ash should you steal what rests here," or "Let your children's names be forgotten if you disturb this place," or, most chilling of all, "Let your soul wander without mouth, without heart, without name." And once the ink dried, a mixture of soot oil and sometimes blood, the scribe would burn the pen, not the parchment, the pen, because it had touched the words, held the threat, carried divine poison. Some refused the job. Some said yes and never worked again. One tale speaks of a young carver who misspelled a single glyph in a royal curse, a bird symbol facing left instead of right. That night he dreamed of wings beating in his lungs. He died coughing feathers. Coincidence? Or did the gods read too closely? The curse carvers lived simply, far from temples. They whispered to no one, spoke only when asked. But they remembered every word they wrote, and feared them, because in Egypt words weren't just symbols. They were force. They became what they described. And a curse once spoken, once carved, lived forever, long after the pharaoh had crumbled, long after the tomb had collapsed, long after the world forgot the scribe who wrote it, because that was the cost of their craft. You give others eternal life, and erase your own. It's easy to think of them as villains, grave robbers, tomb breakers, sneaking into sacred halls with torches and chisels, stealing what the dead were promised. But not every tomb was broken for gold. Some came for something else. In ancient Egypt, a burial wasn't just a resting place. It was a sealed universe full of magic maps, objects too sacred to be spoken aloud. For some, those objects were worth more than treasure. They came for spells, stolen amulets, scraps of the Book of the Dead, clay tablets inscribed with protective chants. A single line of glyphs could be sold in markets to people desperate to cure illness, ward off spirits, or control the will of others. Tomb robbers became dealers of the divine. Some were former priests, exiled scribes, men who had once buried the kings and now returned for what they'd hidden. Not out of greed, out of need. Famine came. Children starved. And in the silence of the night, a man remembered where the pharaoh slept. One whispered story tells of a midwife who broke into a queen's tomb to find an herb buried with her. She believed it could save her daughter. She left behind gold, took only a pouch of dried leaves. But even those who came for power, not food, were transformed. The tombs were dark. The air was old, heavy, alive. They say some robbers went mad, hearing voices in walls, seeing shapes in the torch smoke that didn't move with the flame. One man entered with 10 companions. Only one returned, eyes wide, hands trembling. He never spoke again. But each night he scratched lines in the dirt as if trying to write his way back out. Still the thefts continued, because the dead were rich, and the living were not. And over time, kings prepared for this. Fake passages, false sarcophagi, walls painted to mislead. Some even buried curses as traps. But nothing stopped the desperate. They didn't want thrones. They didn't want power. They wanted a little light in a world growing darker. And they believed the dead had it. So the tombs were opened, the seals were broken, not by evil, but by hunger, by grief, by belief. And perhaps if you'd been there with nothing in your hands and a sick child in your arms, you might have done the same. He walked with a cane, but not because of age, because the stone floors had shifted and he no longer trusted his footing. He lit the incense slowly, not to rush, not to miss the moment when smoke touched sky. He was the last priest of a temple no longer remembered, to gods no longer worshipped. He had survived 3 dynasties, 3 kings, 3 regimes, 3 changes in the names of power. And through it all, he remained. At first, he was celebrated, a young acolyte with a pure voice, steady hands, a gift for reciting rituals without pause. Then, respected, trusted to hold the keys to the sanctuary, to bathe the statue of Amun, to read dreams for generals before they marched to war. But time is a tide that wears away marble and memory. The last pharaoh gave him coins, the next one gave him silence, and the next took the temple away, closed the gates, sealed the doors, said the gods must change or be forgotten. And still he came. Each dawn he offered water to an empty altar, wrote blessings in the dust where scripture had once been carved. He sang hymns to walls that echoed only with pigeons now. But he never missed a day. The townspeople called him mad, some called him holy. Children watched him, but did not follow. He grew thinner, his robes faded, his chants cracked. But his faith never wavered. Because in Egypt, to forget the gods was to risk forgetting yourself. One morning they found the incense still burning, the bowl of water untouched, and him seated upright, eyes closed, hands folded. He had died as he had lived in service. No royal tomb, no statue, just a whisper in the corner of the marketplace. That was the man who spoke to gods when no one else dared. And perhaps, just perhaps, a god remembered him. One he had served when the sun still listened. Because sometimes the most eternal thing in Egypt was not gold, not monuments, but a man who refused to stop believing. No one saw her leave. No guards, no servants, no shadows. One night, she was there among silk curtains, frankincense smoke, and whispered rivalries. The next she was gone. She had escaped the harem. And she never came back. In ancient Egypt, the royal harem was a gilded cage, comfortable, ornate, deadly, a place where women were watched more than they were seen, where ambition whispered through perfume and death wore a smile. To escape it was unthinkable. But she did. No name was recorded, no scroll bore her story, but her legend slipped between cracks in the walls. Some say she faked illness, that a guard pitied her, that she bribed a servant with a gold pin and a desperate look. Others say she vanished through magic. A spell, a charm, a night where the gods turned their gaze. What's known is this: she was never found. No royal search was launched, no announcement made. Because to admit she was missing would mean admitting someone could leave Pharaoh's grasp, and no one wanted that story told. It wasn't a dream. At least you don't think it was. You were young, maybe 8, maybe 9, old enough to remember, too young to explain. You had wandered too far past the edge of the village, where the reeds grew thick and the sun felt heavier. And then you saw him. He stood on the riverbank where the light bent strangely, and the air didn't move. Tall, still, wearing linen robes that fluttered without wind, his skin the color of earth, his eyes like something carved, and his crown not golden, not jeweled, just white, pure white, shaped like the one you'd seen in pictures painted on cracked temple walls. You knew it then, before he turned, before he nodded. Pharaoh. Not an actor, not a priest. Something older, something heavier. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. But you felt it, like a pressure in your chest, like a command inside your bones. And then he was gone. Just reeds, and river, and sky. You told your father. He laughed. Told you not to talk nonsense in front of guests. You told your mother. She touched your face, called it a beautiful dream. You told the old woman who sold amulets. She went quiet, very quiet, then handed you a stone carved with a single eye and told you to keep it close to your heart for 3 days. You did, but no one else believed you. Years passed. You stopped talking about it, until once in a museum you saw a statue, small, weathered, unlabeled, and something in you whispered, "That's him," even though the face was cracked, even though the eyes were gone. And now sometimes, in the quiet, you still hear the reeds shifting. Even when there's no water nearby, you feel the sun warm a part of your back that no light touches. And you wonder, did he choose you? Did he need to be seen? Did he leave something in you that never fully left, or did you just fall into a crease in time? A pocket where memory and myth overlap for one heartbeat. Maybe he wasn't real. Maybe you imagined it. But then again, how do you explain the scarab that appeared in your drawer 3 years later? Or the dreams of temples you've never visited? But remember clearly, some truths are only yours, and some kings never die. She lived, they say, as a ghost, among river villages with dye on her fingertips and a veil across her face. She helped birth children. She sang old hymns no one remembered. She never married, never stayed in one place long. But people noticed strange things. She spoke 5 languages, knew how to mix oils that cured fever, wrote in symbols even the priests had forgotten. One boy claimed he saw her once kneeling by the river, placing lotus petals on the water and whispering something in a tongue he couldn't name. And when he blinked, she was gone. She died alone. No tomb, no sarcophagus, just the sky above her and the Nile below. But those who buried her found a tiny object under her robe, a copper scarab etched with a pharaoh's name, worn smooth from touch, hidden but never forgotten. And now her story drifts. Not written, not carved, just passed from hush to hush. Because not every woman in ancient Egypt wanted power, or riches, or revenge. Some just wanted a life that was theirs. And to get it, she walked away from the palace and into the unknown, and never looked back. You made it out. You're not sure how, but you did. The tomb closed behind you, the dust settled, the torches burned low, and no one else knew what you had seen. But the dreams, they stayed. At first, it was just the smell. Resin, old salt, smoke that clung to your skin no matter how many times you bathed. Then came the tapping. In the walls, in the corners, always 3 soft knocks, like someone asking to be remembered. You told yourself it was nothing, just echoes, old air. But then the dreams grew sharper. You weren't just wandering halls. You were back in the tomb, your hand holding the torch, your breath loud in your ears. And always he was there. Not angry, not sad, just waiting. Sometimes he sat on the edge of a broken throne. Sometimes he stood beside a golden boat. Once he was lying in a stone coffin with his eyes open and your name on his lips. You moved cities, burned the map you'd sketched, locked away the necklace you'd never admitted you took. Still he came. You began to speak less, sleep less, eat less. And when you did sleep, you woke with sand in your sheets. Just a little, just enough to notice. Years passed. No one asked, no one knew. But you could feel it, in the way mirrors fogged for no reason, in the way shadows pooled at your feet, even in the midday sun. He wasn't angry, he wasn't kind, he just was. A weight in your ribcage, a whisper at the base of your skull. You saw doctors, priests, dream readers. One woman held your hand and said you brought something back with you. You didn't respond, you didn't need to. Because deep down, you knew. You survived the tomb, the curses, the seals, the shifting stones, but you didn't leave alone. And now, every time you blink, every time you forget where you are, he slips a little closer. Not to punish, not to harm, just to remind you he remembers, and so do you. You were never crowned, never anointed, never wrapped in linen or weighed against a feather. You've never worn a golden collar, never walked barefoot across temple stones as priests cleared the way. You weren't a pharaoh, and yet, sometimes it feels like you're carrying something that isn't entirely your own. A name that isn't yours whispers at the edge of your dreams. A face you've never seen flickers behind closed eyes. You walk past museum glass and your pulse quickens. Not at the gold, not at the statues. At the curve of a hieroglyph you somehow already know. at a pattern in the weaving that matches the dream you had last spring. You didn't study Egypt, not really, but the words draw you in. The myths feel familiar. The death rituals feel expected. And when you read the names of pharaohs, some echo louder than others, as if one of them is waiting for you to say it again. To remember, to release. You're not haunted. Not exactly. But every now and then you find yourself touching stone as if it could remember you back. You pause at doorways, looking for symbols. You wake at 4:33 a.m., certain you heard drums. You trace the eye of Horus on a napkin without realizing it. It's nothing. It's everything. Some say memory is inherited. Some say souls travel. Some say the dead seek vessels willing to remember. Maybe that's all it is. A sliver of soul looking for a voice. A pharaoh long since forgotten whose name was chipped away and whose statue crumbled, but who still wants to be known. And maybe, just maybe they found you. Not to rule, not to command. Just to be seen. One more time. One more whisper in the silence between thoughts. Because immortality in the end isn't about pyramids. Or gold. Or tombs. It's about being carried in someone's memory. And tonight, for a few minutes, you became that memory. You bore the ghost of a pharaoh who didn't want power. Just presence. No stone above your head. No tomb walls around you. No linen wrapped tight across your chest. You wake up, still here. The air is still, but not heavy. No incense, just the soft scent of your pillow, the hum of your fan. Not a priest in sight, not a crown on your head. You're not in Egypt, not really, but your heartbeat hasn't caught up yet. You lie still, eyes barely open, trying to hold on to what you just saw, the cracked corridors, the hidden doors, the glint of gold in torchlight, the whisper of a name you've already forgotten. But it's fading. The dream, the memory, the weight of all those lives you didn't live. And slowly you feel it again. Your breath, your bed, your room, the soft weight of the blanket, the faint creak of the ceiling, the world of the living quietly welcoming you back. You're not royalty, you're not cursed, you're just here, alive, safe, unwrapped, your pulse steady, your fingers warm. Your name, yours alone, not carved into stone, not whispered by strangers, not lost in time. You think of all the pharaohs buried with spells and treasures to keep them from forgetting who they were. And yet, here you are, remembering them, carrying them. If only for a night, maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all immortality is, a borrowed breath in someone else's sleep. You close your eyes again, but this time, not to flee, not to hide, just to rest. And in the quiet you feel a presence, not haunting, not divine, just the memory of stories that needed to be told. And now they have been. So sleep. The tombs are closed, the curses are silent, the desert winds have stilled. You're not there anymore. You're here, clean, safe, alive. We picture them draped in gold, eating grapes, ordering pyramids with a gesture, immortal, untouchable, glorious. But that's not the full story. Many pharaohs died in pain, afraid, alone. Behind the thrones, behind the painted gods and temple walls were men trapped in rituals and women silenced by duty. Being divine didn't protect you from nightmares, from betrayal, from bones that ached or hearts that broke quietly in the dark. The wealth, yes, it was real. Gold from Nubia, perfumes from Punt, fine linens, lapis incense by the pound. But so were the ulcers, the infections, the injuries never healed. So were the sleepless nights watching the shadows by your door for a servant who looked too long or a son too eager. The fame only useful while alive. Once dead, your name was at the mercy of politics. One pharaoh's story could be etched into walls, another's scraped off in one generation. Some never even made it to their tombs, buried in haste, or not at all. Their greatest fear wasn't death, it was being forgotten. And still we look at their statues and call them gods. We forget the bent spines under those robes, the coughs hidden behind fans, the loneliness wrapped in incense, because it's easier to remember them as powerful, as distant, as beautiful. But they were also human, terrified of making the wrong decision, tired of pretending they knew what the gods wanted, haunted by the pressure to never cry, never falter, never age. The truth being, Pharaoh wasn't a reward. It was a prison built from marble, painted in gold, and lit by a sun that never let you rest. So next time you see their statues, those flawless profiles and unblinking eyes, remember what they carried, and how heavy it must have been to wear a crown when all you wanted was to sleep without fear. The mummy doesn't rise. Not really. There are no dragging footsteps, no outstretched hands wrapped in linen, no ancient curses muttered in English. That's all. Much newer than the tombs. The idea of the mummy's curse was born not in Egypt, but in drawing rooms and newspapers in 20th century Europe. It started with stories, then coincidences, then imagination took over. But fear is older. The ancient Egyptians didn't want to be disturbed after death. That part is true. Not because they'd rise from the grave, but because their journey was delicate. Once buried, your soul had a path to walk. Interrupt that journey, and you might never reach the end. A broken seal, a missing heart, a name erased, and you were lost forever. So they protected themselves. Spells, traps, false doors, even threats carved in stone. May the jackals tear the throat of he who enters here. Not because the dead would chase you, but because they couldn't, if you destroyed what they needed to become. The real curse was for the soul inside the tomb. But still, we tell stories of mummies returning, eyes glowing, seeking vengeance. Why? Because it's easier to fear the dead than to admit how often we disturb them. We've cracked open their sarcophagi, lit their faces for museum walls, put their bones on display for tourists and field trips. We look into their empty sockets and forget they were people with families, worries, rituals. We fear their return, not because they're monsters, but because we know we haven't let them rest. And yet, there's a strange comfort in the idea that they could come back, that a soul could survive thousands of years, cross oceans, pass through glass cases, and still remember who wronged them. That's the power of the story. It's not about horror. It's about memory, and what it means to be disturbed long after you've died. So no, not every mummy comes back. But the fear? The fear never left. Because deep down, we know we shouldn't be here. In their tombs, with flashlights, and tags on their toes. We know. And maybe that's the real curse, the guilt that won't decay. They called him a god, son of Ra, voice of Mayat, lord of the two lands. But even gods had to ask for permission. Because, in ancient Egypt, power didn't flow from the top. Down, it moved sideways, twisting through temples and settling in the hands of men in plain linen robes. The priests. Not just caretakers of faith, but keepers of influence. They held the calendars, the omens, the rituals that tied Pharaoh to the divine. And without those, he was just a man in expensive sandals. Every major decision, war, construction, marriage, was first weighed against the stars, against prophecy, against what the gods whispered. And who interpreted those whispers? Not the king, the priests. If they didn't approve, you didn't move. They could stall a coronation by claiming the sacred hour had not arrived. They could question a queen's purity and silence a dynasty. They could declare a dream dangerous and force a pharaoh to change course. And if a ruler pushed too hard too fast, they simply erased him, tore down his statues, scratched out his name, claimed he had never been chosen by the gods at all. It happened. More than once. One pharaoh tried to change the religion. He worshipped only one god, ignored the temples, spoke to the sun directly. The priests waited, watched, and when he died, they wiped him away. His name gone, his city abandoned, even his mummy hidden. Because in Egypt, ruling without divine approval wasn't just dangerous, it was forbidden. So pharaohs learned to play the part. They bowed when needed, built temples to win favor, performed rituals, not because they believed, but because they understood control belonged to those who claimed to speak for the sky. And even the son of a god needed a script. So no, they weren't all-powerful. They were performers, mediators, tightrope walkers in a world where the wrong offering could undo a kingdom. And sometimes, the one who seemed to rule was just the one who feared the gods the most. We rarely say their names, but they were there, behind the thrones, beside the altars, inside the scrolls that didn't survive. Queens, priestesses, regents, strategists. Not silent, not soft, just silenced. Ancient Egypt gave women more rights than many later empires. They could own land, divorce, inherit titles, run estates. And sometimes they ruled, as Pharaoh. Not in secret, not in shame, Hatshepsut wore the crown, took on the full title, even the false beard. She built temples, led expeditions, brought peace and wealth. And yet, after her death, her statues were smashed, her name carved out, her face scraped from walls by those who came after, as if erasing her could make people forget that power once wore the shape of a woman. Nefertiti ruled too. Perhaps alone, perhaps under a hidden name. We still don't know, because the records stop. Abruptly, deliberately. A powerful queen disappears. Later, scribes chose not to remember her. And what isn't written is often assumed never to have been. It's not that these women were weak. It's that their strength frightened those who came next. And history bends to fear more than truth. So they were folded away, reduced to side notes, labeled consort when they were commander, wife when they were ruler. But the stones remember. The statues that remain show their posture, their gaze, their hand clenched not in prayer, but in power. You can still find them if you look past the tourist guides, past the museum plaques, in the details, in the hieroglyphs that switch pronouns mid-sentence, in the reliefs where a woman is depicted 1 inch taller than her husband. They were there, in the bloodline, in the policy, in the dreams of pharaohs who feared their wives more than their enemies. They weren't forgotten because they didn't matter. They were forgotten because they did. So speak their names if you find them. Say them aloud. Let the echo reach where history buried what it feared most. A woman who ruled and refused to be small. They rise out of the sand like miracles, temples, pyramids, obelisks that pierce the sky. We stand before them hushed awed, forgetting to ask the one question no one carved in stone who bled for this not gods, not pharaohs, but workers, thousands, farmers during flood season, craftsmen who passed skill from father to son, stonecutters who couldn't feel their hands by dusk. They weren't slaves, not most of them. That's a myth. But they weren't free either. They were bound by duty, by debt, by dreams of a meal at the end of the shift. They hauled limestone blocks in heat that blurred the air. They dragged sleds through sand made slick with water and sweat. They lifted, stacked, measured, chiseled. And sometimes they fell. Crushed beneath slabs twice their weight, collapsed from sunstroke, swallowed by scaffolding that cracked without warning. There are no tombs for them, no golden masks. Just bones found in shallow pits, near workers' villages, joints worn to dust spines, twisted from carrying the dreams of kings. But they built beauty. They made the world remember names that would have vanished like breath on glass. They carved the gods. They shaped eternity. And in return, they were promised little. A place to sleep, bread and onions, maybe beer, maybe a name scratched on a wall no tourist sees. We admire the monuments, the symmetry, the precision, but we forget the pain, the fingers that bled to make lines straight, the backs that broke to lift glory skyward. There's no curse written on the stone for that, no warning that says here lies someone who died for someone else's forever. So when you look at the pyramids, remember they're not just tombs. They're tombstones for all the hands that never held a scepter, but held up the heavens anyway. The crowns have crumbled, the priests are gone, the temples fell to dust and the gods have grown silent. But we're still here, still staring, still digging. Centuries later, our fingers trace the same carved walls they once prayed beneath. We photograph their tombs. We scan their bones. We speak their names into cold museum halls. Why we tell ourselves it's about history, education, respect. But deep down, it feels like something more, something closer to obsession. We can't let them go. Every generation finds a new way to resurrect them. In books, in film, in children's Halloween costumes, we dress as them, pretend to be them, write stories where they live again, but on our terms. Because we can't stop wondering, what if they were more than human? What if they knew something we don't? Maybe that's what hooks us. Not the power they held, but the possibility that they still hold something. A secret, a curse. A truth about death we've spent millennia running from. So we crawl back into their crypts, pull them from the sand, open their sarcophagi with latex gloves and infrared scanners. We measure their skulls, argue over their DNA, search their teeth for signs of how they suffered. But we never ask why we can't stop looking. Maybe it's because they never stopped being kings, just became something else. Symbols, mysteries, voids for our questions to echo inside. And maybe, if we dig deep enough, unroll enough linen, translate enough spells, we'll find the piece that tells us what death really is. But they never promised us that. Their magic wasn't meant for us. Their rituals weren't written for modern minds. We were never supposed to see what was buried with them. And yet, we keep opening doors, they sealed with blood. We say it's for science. But some nights, when the light flickers, when the air gets heavy, you wonder, are we the ones who remember them? Or have they made sure we never forget? Not power, not glory. What remains is obsession, and maybe that's how they win. You've never stepped foot in Egypt. Not really. Not in this life. But something lingers. A pull when you see sandstone. A stillness when you hear chanting. A strange recognition in the curve of a hieroglyph you don't actually read. It's not déjà vu. It's something deeper. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's story. Maybe it's the part of being human that reaches backward without knowing why. Because memory doesn't always belong to you. Sometimes it finds you, in dreams, in fascination, in the quiet ache you feel when you stand in front of something too old to understand and want to weep anyway. The pharaohs are gone, their temples cracked, their spells faded, but their presence, it lingers, in stone, in symbol, in you. Every time you say their name, Tutankhamun, Nefertiti, Ramses, Hatshepsut, you call something back. You echo their breath. You light the wick of a flame buried long ago. You're not cursed, you're just connected. To a past that still hums beneath museum floors, to a grief too old for words, to a wonder that refuses to die. Because maybe that's all history really is, a chain of people carrying fragments of those who came before. And tonight, through this story, you carried them. Not in your hands, but in your heartbeat, in your stillness, in your breath. You've walked with ghosts who were gold and linen. You've heard their silence, felt their fear, shared their gaze toward stars that no longer guide us. But even now, in a room with no torchlight, no tomb walls, no priest chanting, they are with you. Not haunting, just present, just waiting to be remembered again. So maybe it's not about kings, or curses, or treasure. Maybe it's about carrying a story that's older than your name and letting it rest for just one more night. And if someone ever asks why you care about ancient Egypt, just tell them, because sometimes you feel like you were there. You didn't need a torch. You didn't need a map, or a spell, or a name written in gold. You came as you were, tired, curious, a little restless beneath the sheets. And still you made it. You wandered through tombs, listened to whispers in the dark, touched stone with your mind's eye, and read the names no one speaks aloud anymore. You've met kings, servants, mothers, traitors, gods made of starlight and fear. You walked barefoot through sand soaked in secrets, and even when it was quiet, too quiet, you stayed. That takes something. Not everyone makes it through a story like this. Most turn away when it gets too strange, too heavy, too haunted. But you didn't. You kept walking, through royal silence, through sacred blood, through the ache of being seen by eyes that have been closed for 3,000 years. And now you're here, at the edge, where the story starts to blur, where the gods return to stars and the dead return to dust. You came looking for sleep, but you earned more than that. You earned stillness, understanding, a kind of quiet most people never reach, and all without leaving your bed. So rest, traveler. Not because you've escaped something, but because you've seen it clearly and came out the other side. You don't need a crown. You don't need a temple. You don't need anyone's permission. You walked through a world built from fear and fire, and you didn't burn. You're still here, and the darkness, it's behind you now. They built monuments for themselves, stone stacked higher than fear, walls painted with names repeated 1,000 times just to be sure the gods remembered. They filled tombs with gold, with prayers, with honey and wine, and tiny boats carved to carry them into eternity. They thought glory would guard them. And for a while it did. But even the brightest gold dims in silence, and time has no favorites. It doesn't care how many servants mourned you, or how many titles were carved after your name. It doesn't pause because you were once called divine. Time moves, and when it does, it buries. Most pharaohs you've never heard of, their statues eroded, their cities swallowed by sand, their gods renamed, their children forgotten. Some were never buried properly, some were never found, some were found, but their names meant nothing by then, because memory isn't built on how much power you had, but on how long someone chooses to carry you. And most kings, they're too heavy to hold forever. Even the ones we still remember: Ramses, Tutankhamun, Cleopatra, we only know fragments, stories with soft edges, mysteries too worn to answer. Their glory didn't save them, not from erasure, not from decay, not from the quiet truth that one day even the tallest pyramid will be gone. And that's not sad, it's just real. It's a reminder that we're not meant to last in the ways we expect, not in stone, not in titles, not in gold, but maybe in something else, in a whisper, in a dream, in a voice that speaks their name one last time before falling asleep. Glory fades, but presence can linger in softer places, not on thrones but in thoughts, in moments like this one, right now, where you remember a pharaoh not for their conquests but for their fear, their loneliness, their long, quiet walk toward death with only a song to keep them company. And that's something glory could never do. We like to think we know better now, that we've outgrown spells, grown past incense, left omens behind in the ruins where they belong. But maybe they weren't entirely wrong. Maybe the magic didn't move the world, but it moved them. And that was enough. They believed that words could protect, that names had weight, that a scarab carved from stone could hold off death for just one more sunrise. It seems foolish until you remember how many of us wear charms today. How many whisper something before boarding a plane? How many knock on wood when the world feels unsteady? It's not about being right. It's about not feeling helpless. And maybe that's all the spells were. Tiny ways to push back against the silence. You see, they lived in a world that didn't make sense. Floods, plagues, the sudden end of kings, the disappearance of stars from the sky. They needed reasons. So they gave things meaning, ritual, symbol, structure. Not to control the world, but to survive it. They didn't light oil lamps because they thought fire would fix everything. They did it because it gave them a rhythm, a moment, a breath. And honestly, that's still what we do. Light a candle, take a deep breath, listen to a story, something to tell the darkness, I see you. But you don't win tonight. So maybe the amulets did work not by changing fate, but by making people brave enough to walk toward it anyway. Maybe the Book of the Dead wasn't a manual for the afterlife, but a guide for how to carry hope when your hands are shaking. Maybe they were never meant to beat death, just to meet it without kneeling. And maybe that's the real magic, not in the spells, but in the act of saying them aloud and believing for just a moment that you are not alone. Not foolish, not primitive, just human. Picture it. A young pharaoh, barely more than a boy, lying awake in a chamber carved from stone. The air is thick with incense. Outside, a jackal howls somewhere deep in the dark. He shifts beneath linen sheets, turns to his side, stares at the low flicker of the oil lamp, and wonders if he'll still be alive when the sun rises. You've done that too, haven't you? Maybe not in a palace. Maybe not with guards outside your door. But you felt it, that heaviness in your chest. That question you don't say out loud. What if I don't make it through the night? They had gods. They had scrolls. They had gold and spells and sacred animals. But they still had fear. Still had moments where sleep felt like surrender and dreams felt like traps. He may have ruled a kingdom, but he was still a boy trying to believe the whispers that told him he was chosen. Still a son who missed his mother's voice. Still a human with hands that trembled when no one was watching. And you've been there too, tossing in the dark, listening to the creak of the floor, reaching for a blanket, not because you were cold, but because it felt like armor against something you couldn't name. That's what connects you. Not blood, not time, but the echo of doubt that slips in right before sleep. They dream too, of safety, of love, of not being alone in a world that asks too much and explains too little. They weren't just kings. They were dreamers, worriers, children who grew up too fast in rooms too big for comfort. And tonight, if you're lying there with eyes wide open and breath shallow, know this: you're not the first to feel like this. You're part of something old, soft, and painfully human. So let the dream come. Let the dark in. not to swallow you, but to remind you that even pharaohs once prayed for just one quiet night. There's no more stone beneath your feet, no more echo of sandals on cold hallways, no incense burning, no chant humming through temple walls. That world, the one of golden masks and whispered betrayals, it's gone. You're not there anymore. You're not lying in a tomb carved for eternity. You're not watching shadows move behind silk curtains. You're not waiting for poison in your evening wine. There's no crown on your head, no priest reading your dreams aloud, no God demanding sacrifice, just you, right here, where the air is soft, the night is quiet, and the danger isn't real. You've walked through centuries tonight, past curses and coronations, past jealous queens and sacred knives and spells written in blood. But now, you're home. You're under a blanket, not a burial shroud. Your pillow smells like detergent, not desert dust. And the only sound is the faint whir of the fan, not the warning rattle of a sacred snake. Let that sink in. Let the weight of that journey slide off your shoulders. Let your body remember what it's like to be safe, to be real, to be right here. You don't need to hold any of it anymore. Not the names, not the symbols, not the fear. You don't need to wonder if someone's watching from the dark or if your name will be remembered 3,000 years from now. Tonight, the only thing you need is rest. No guards, no gods. Just gravity and peace, because you're not there anymore. You're here, alive and quiet, and that's more than enough. Your eyelids are heavier now. Not from gold, but from peace. No one is watching you. No one is writing your dreams down to turn them into prophecy. There's no ceremony left, no throne waiting, no judgment, just the steady hum of a quiet room and the soft rhythm of your own breath. You are not wrapped in linen. You are wrapped in cotton, in warmth, in quiet. Your heart is not being weighed against a feather. It's beating slowly, gently, like it knows you've come home. There is no oil on your skin, no spells to recite, no gods to impress. You don't need to prove you're worthy of another day. You're already in it, right now, right here. You are safe. There is nothing lurking beneath the bed, no snake curled in the corner, no curse written on the wall, only stillness and softness and quiet. You are clean, not ritually, not ceremonially, just simply. Because the day is over, because you've made it through, because rest is yours now. You are still breathing, feel it, the cool air in, the warmth as it leaves, a pulse in your fingers, a soft rise in your chest. You don't need a name carved in stone. You don't need to be remembered for 1,000 years. You just need this breath, and the next, and the quiet between them. Tonight, there are no gods here, no kings, no afterlife to earn. Only this moment, this bed, this pause, and you floating gently toward sleep. Let go of the dust, of the dreams, of the desert. You've traveled far enough. Now close your eyes. You are safe, you are clean, you are still breathing. And the pharaohs, they're sleeping too.